Muchas gracias y bienvenidos de regreso. Welcome back to the main stage of the C40 World Mayor Summit. And hello again to all our friends following us online. For everyone in the room and watching the live stream, we encourage you to join the lively conversation on social media by adding the hashtag C40 Summit and also the hashtag United in Action to all your posts. To start the afternoon, we're going to explore how cities are developing green and thriving neighborhoods, where residents can access all services, goods, and green spaces they need within a short walk or a bicycle ride away from their homes. Please join me in welcoming back to the stage Executive Director of C40, Mr. Mark Watts. Bienvenido de regreso, Mark.
A great morning. Hope, unlike me, you've managed to have some lunch as well, ready for this session. I imagine in the context of this discussion around green and thriving neighbourhoods, there's complete agreement in this room that the model of 20th century city design is no longer fit for today. That model that promotes sprawl, segregation, specialisation of city neighbourhoods, with residential areas separated from business zones, commercial areas, and industry, all of them connected by transport infrastructure that is mainly oriented around the needs of those who can afford to travel by car rather than the mode of people-centred transport. We all know that's led to suffering long commutes, poor air quality, high levels of carbon emissions from transport, but also plain lack of amenities in many neighbourhoods, which entrench inequalities and perpetuate unsustainable lifestyles, reducing all of our city dwellers' quality of life. So this session is going to be very much about finding a way back, finding a way to urbanise in harmony between nature and people. This is something that science is very much looking at. The IPCC, the group of scientists that focuses on how to tackle the climate emergency, their research finds that we can cut urban emissions by a quarter, 25%, if we move away from that sprawling design of cities to compact, mixed-use, resource-efficient cities. And in particular, they're promoting now the concept of the 15-minute city, which I'm sure everyone knows around, a model developed by Professor Carlos Marino, who we're going to hear from in a moment, which he proposed a vision of a polycentric city composed of multiple complete and people-centered neighborhoods where everybody can meet their everyday needs within a short walk or a short bike ride or short public transport journey from their home. It's a concept that's taken off all around the world now, so it's got many different names. So 15-minute city in Paris and in Rome, superblocks in Barcelona, vital neighborhoods in Bogota, a well-being city here in Buenos Aires, 20-minute neighborhoods, so a little bit longer to get around in Melbourne, and proximity policies and many, many, many other names all around the world. And it's a concept that's really, really taken off in the context of how we experience the world during the COVID lockdowns, that increase in remote working from home, which has made us all think much more about our local neighbourhoods and what we need and want from just around where we live. And I guess just highlighting the value of the local environment. And so, more than anything, the 50 minutes concept is taking us back to the neighbourhood rather than just looking top down on the big strategic approach to a metropolis. It's definitely a shift away from sectoral citywide approaches. It means it encourages city governments to engage with local communities to develop and coordinate actions, such as providing more housing choice, supporting local businesses, expanding green spaces, reimagining streets with communities, how they would like those streets to be designed, and creating more and better public space that prioritises people and nature. So it's a very local, a very human scale approach, and offering, we think in C40, a unique opportunity to accelerate climate actions, very synergistic with it. So we at C40, we've been working over the last few years very closely with Professor Marino and his team to help develop and promote that 15-minute city concept. We think it can be central to cities' climate action approach, developing a vision of an ecological society. And indeed, we've been building therefore on the Zero Carbon Districts program that we already had, and I'm delighted to announce now a new Green and Thriving Neighbourhoods program, which this session is going to really kick off, delivering proof of concepts for what a 15-minute city really can be. So initially, it's going to implement neighbourhood pilot projects in at least 5 cities, and then create an international network of practitioners to advise many, many more cities who are trying to do a similar thing. It's something we're doing very much in collaboration, so joining forces with 2 UN agencies, UN Habitat and the UN Environment Programme, with our fabulous long-term partner, the international built environment consultancy, Arup, an incredible new partner for C40, the urban investor, NREP, and of course, Professor Carlos Moreno himself as scientific director of the Pantheon-Sorbonne University ETI lab. He is, I think, one of the greatest living thinkers, not least because his ideas get taken and put into practice by policymakers. So it's a huge pleasure to now welcome Professor Moreno to the stage.
Thank you so much, Mark. Good afternoon. Thank you to Mark for these kind words. I will speak in Spanish for a personal reason.
I was born in Colombia, and at the age of 20, I went to France as a political refugee, as a person who was persecuted, as many other people in Argentina were also persecuted for defending certain causes. This is one of the first times that I come back to Latin America to speak before an audience full of mayors. So I think that it's quite relevant to speak in my mother tongue. I would like to thank Mark Watts. I would also like to thank the chair of C40 Cities for their commitment and for making this 15-minute city concept so relevant. In my time with you today, I would like to talk about this concept as a friendly concept for multi-services offered to the citizens. We're talking about the capacity to reinvent our cities surrounding a very essential thing for human beings, which is dignity, justice, and equity in the face of 3 fundamental threats that we have in our lives: climate urgency, economic difficulties with specialized cities, and social disaggregation that takes place in neighborhood and quarters where the social bond and economic interactivity have been lost. If we want to summarize what the 15-minute city concept means, it could be 10 minutes or 18 minutes also. But the important thing is to give proximity, to give neighborhoods a transformation that will allow the city as a whole to leave behind 70 years of segmentations, which made us live in neighborhoods that were divided for the rich or the poor, that were cultural, that were non-cultural, and with long distances that we had to cover every day, which degraded family life because we're losing our lives because we waste so much time commuting. 60% of the time we spend indoors because buildings are there for only one thing. Neighborhoods that become ghost towns, streets that are only for cars and not for children, lack of water, lack of green areas. So what we are proposing is to find, once again, the roots, which in Latin America, when we were 20 years old, which should be a real peaceful revolution for happy proximity, so that each person, man, woman, the elderly, the youth, can find the capacity to live in harmony with nature, with low CO2 emissions, so that work can be distributed differently. And thanks to technology, this is possible, and to recreate new solidarity-based bonds so that we can help one another. This concept has gone all over the world. And why? Why in every continent? Why in every city? I just came from Korea, in Africa, in Latin America. Then I will go back to Central Europe and Poland. Why? Because this reflects a common language that is easily understood by mayors, by the academic sector, by women, by youth, by all sectors, because we are reinforcing a concept of social life to have a dignified living and to give our space to ecology and to have more durable cities and to have viable cities from an economic perspective and to have a social impact to achieve more equitable cities. These are 4 fundamental points of the 15-minute cities. And now let's talk about happy proximities. Daily ecology that does not punish, but rather promotes multi-service proximity to generate employment and economic activity in all the city and not just in some areas. To foster social bonds that are also intergenerational and focusing on the elderly, on those who are more frail, on women, and with more citizens' participation, with mechanisms that are from each city and from each local government, so that each one of us can be the makers of this proximity that we need, a happy proximity for better quality cities where we can live better. Those are my 5 minutes. Thank you.
Qué precisión. Muchísimas gracias, Carlos.
Thank you, Carlos, for your very precise words.
Mark and Carlos, earlier today, we asked you to share what policy do you think will create the most well-being in your city, and I'm happy to report that we have over 1,000 responses, including one for Sumira in Karachi, who suggests planting trees and creating green spaces within the living areas of cities like parks and playgrounds. So please continue sharing with us your thoughts at c40.org/United in Action. In our next panel, city leaders and sustainable planning experts will explore how urban models like the 15-minute city help reduce emissions, improve air quality, and create vibrant, resilient, well-being cities. Please give a warm welcome to our panelists. Niels Long, Vice President for Global Prevention and Health Promotion in Novo Nordisk. Mayor of Rome, Roberto Gualtieri. Jere Johersen, Head of Global Expansion for INGA Group. And Governor of Santiago Metropolitan Region, Claudio Orrego. Y nuestro moderador, Martina Otto, Head of Secretariat, Climate and Clean Air Coalition at the UN Environment Program. Bienvenidos.
And while we're getting seated, two sentences on this 15-minute city concept as well from my side, because in UNEP we've been working for quite a number of years on a neighborhood approach, and as you heard from Mark, we are teaming up now on this, and we're excited that this is now taking so much traction. But not to take away any further time on this, we're very pleased to have a distinguished panel. And we will start with the Mayor of Rome, Mayor Gualtieri. You've embraced the concept of the 15-minute city and you intend to make Rome a city of proximity. Could you please tell us more about your vision of this 15-minute city and why you believe this is an interesting concept? over to you.
Thank you, thank you. Indeed, I think Carlos Moreno gave a perfect description of the concept that he first, outlined, and then we embrace with great passion, were the basis of our successful campaign and now our government action. Because indeed, I strongly believe, and this is particularly true, I think, for a city which is a very big area like Rome, with 200 different neighbors. Rome is very complex in its structure. That the Council of 15-minute cities is the way to address the two major challenges we are facing, which is the need of reduce the social and territorial distances, reduce inequalities, and seriously address and fight climate change. So we have a concept of 15-minute cities that is based on the one hand of quality of spaces, second of accessibility, and third of sustainability. The quality means not just the aesthetic quality that all neighbors should have the same right to be good, but also the fact that we broaden the concept of services. So quality of rights of citizenship, you must have the public transport, the health, the school, but also the culture, but also the green, but also the sport. So for instance, we broaden in the scope of 15-minute city. We are a lot working to have a cultural hub of quality also in the most peripheral area of the city. And we find a lot of demand and a lot of production of quality. When we talk about, let's say, proximity, we mean proximity that is not just the physical proximity, building kindergarten, building libraries or spaces in all the neighborhoods, but it's also the concept of relational proximity, so that you just not bring a service closer to people, but you make people protagonists in building a human relationship. So you encourage active citizenship, participation, which is fundamental, and also closer human relationship between people. And the third concept of sustainability is for us, and many people said already, Colau and others, for us, environmental sustainability and social sustainability, meaning changes also our social economic system, are two faces of the same medal. We cannot do one without the others. And in this respect, I think this concept is powerful because on the one hand, on environmental, it reduces distances, the need of travel. You have a city which is not the 4D city, where an area where you work, where you consume, etc. And so you consume less, you have to travel less, you regain more freedom. But on the second time, we also intense environmental sustainability also with the spreading of a construction of energy communities around these neighbors. And the social dimension is equally important because promoting active participation and putting the concept of care, of social care, integrated social care, and promotion to job and employment close to people is fundamental to reduce these distances and investing especially more in the area which are more, let's say, fragile and vulnerable. So we are trying to apply to the Roman situation this concept, but we find it perfect, and it's also something that citizens understand. It's also a way which citizens criticize us because when they are stuck in the traffic, say, Mayor, where is the 15-minute city? I'm here waiting. So it's challenging, let's say. And that's why some say 20 minutes, better 30 minutes. But I think the concept is good as it is, and it's a very high challenge, but it's a very powerful concept.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So I think you all have seen it's, yes, a round of applause. A very people-centered approach, and indeed 15 minutes can be in large places like many of the cities in Latin America very quickly be 30 minutes, but still following the very same concept, so not to be held up exactly on that. Well, we now move to Governor Orrego, and you recently put back on the agenda the renovation of the Alameda Providencia corridor. And can you tell us a little more about the project, the different approaches that you're developing to revitalize the neighborhood? And I think this is part of a bigger picture, a bigger plan with quite a bit of money behind it as well. So, floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Unfortunately, I'm going to speak in Spanish, so if you have your headphones, please. Time. La Alameda
La Alameda Providencia, it is the most important corridor of the city of Santiago. It has 12 kilometers long, and there they live, study, and go through 2 million people. That is to say, 1 out of 3 people from Santiago use that corridor. There are great political demonstrations that take place there as well. And unfortunately, in the last 3 years, it's been also the victim of a perfect storm. I'm sure you know that Chile had a very strong social, let's say, situation in a park which is called Plaza Italia, which was totally destroyed. All of this corridor is full of graffiti, and then the pandemic took place because of all the unemployment as well. So there was a migratory phenomenon. 900,000 new migrants came to the city, many people living on the streets. So if you go to this corridor today, you'll see that there is insecurity, it looks ugly, and it is destroyed, basically. Our project is related to recover from an urbanistic standpoint this whole space for the city itself. I was listening to the Rome mayor and, of course, Carlo, and this idea of a city at human scale. We're all convened, we're all passionate about it. The question is how to do it. And I'd like to say that out of this project, I do have 4 features on how to build a 15-minute city with a specific project like this. First, you need a lot of coordination and cooperation. Santiago has 34 different municipalities. Here we have 4 different ones in this corridor. A regional government, which I represent, 4 departments or ministries, transportation, housing, interior, etc., plus the private sector, universities, and civil society. Without cooperation, you cannot have a 15-minute city, and there's no Alameda Providencia project. Secondly, a vision that will really be people-centric. The project was done thinking that this corridor would be people-friendly, especially with children, senior citizens, and the disabled. It was done thinking about the bikers, it was done thinking about public transportation, and only towards the end thinking about private cars or vehicles. Thirdly, it's multidimensional. It is a project both regarding urbanism and culture to recover historical heritage. Mobility, because you will have the longest bike lanes in Chile, 24 kilometers crossing the whole city, a high standard bike lane, and strengthening public transportation, but it also has to do with security, that is to say, raising the standards of urbanism. It has to do with social inclusion, but also with ecology. 10,000 trees will be planted in the whole corridor. And lastly, there's a lot of citizen participation in this project. In other words, those who go through it, those who live there, those who work, and those who study in the area. So it is a sizable political, really, project, community, interdisciplinary, interinstitutional. And in this particular case, because of the recent political history, it's very sensitive indeed. So you do require a lot of political will. In other words, you can literally pass into history or be burned at the stake when we think about citizen integration. So if you ask me how we do it, coordinating, being perseverant, with a specific program or plan, and something Carlo also mentioned, this means revitalizing commerce and economy of the whole corridor. Without life, everyday life, without trade, without safe trade, without gastronomy or food areas, you cannot have a 24-hour sustainable city. If you ask me why a governor who's been in this position for a year chooses such a hard project, such a complex project, it is because it is a type of project where you will give back hope to the city that we can have this type of city, and it will show the 34 communes in the city that this is possible. Is it possible? Yes, it is. Is it going to be hard? Undoubtedly it is, but it's worth it. 100% worth it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And you see there's something in common. There's a lot of passion about this concept. We've heard that. And it speaks for the human nature of this concept. Let me now turn to Jette Jørgensen from IKEA. And we all know IKEA, the big blue box in the peripheral areas of our cities. And you're currently totally reinventing the business model of IKEA by thinking about bringing your business into the cities, into the populated urban areas, proposing new types of shops that are more accessible to public transportation, mixed with other local shops and so on. I'll let you describe what it is. Can you please tell us a bit more, and also why you're engaging in that?
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. At IKEA, our vision is to create an everyday better life for the many people. So it makes sense that we're working towards getting more accessible, more sustainable, but also more affordable. So meaning that we actually would like to get even closer to where the many people are. So it goes very well with this 15-minute city concept that we are hearing about here. It's actually not new for us to work with this. It's something that we have been investing in for the last couple of years, because we do want to be where the people are, so where they work, where they socialize, and where they come together. So we have created a city store concept that we're working with now. We actually have implemented it this year. We have implemented it in the UK, in Sweden, in India, and also in Canada. So it's smaller IKEA city stores that we are implementing. The last one, we have done one in London, so getting even closer to the Londoners, making sure that they can actually get to us by foot or by bicycles, or they can use the tube. So it's IKEA Hammersmith, where we have established ourselves into an existing building, so repurposing a building. Call it Livat in Hammersmith, and it's actually our sister company, IKEA Centers, who has done this for us. So it is about also reinventing, it's about repurposing buildings in the cities. We have also lately opened our IKEA city store in Stockholm, downtown Stockholm, also being really close now to the Stockholmers, and it's in our mother country. We are also working with even smaller formats, so where customers can meet us in an even smaller space. We call them IKEA Planning Studios or IKEA Plan and Order Points, you might have heard about. And just newly we have opened one in Melbourne in Australia. So really trying to come around, get together where people are, where they live, work and socialize, and be part of the community, because it is so important for us to be there. Being close to the public transport, being able to access us by foot or by bike, I think it's so important for us with this whole sustainability agenda that we have. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Before I finish, I also want to say we are, of course, an omni-channel retailer, so we also have some online sales, meaning that actually 25% of our sales come from online. So we are also working when it comes to the last mile, when it comes to home deliveries. So by 2025, we want to be zero emission on home deliveries, so in all our home deliveries in the whole world. So we have a commitment on that. We already have now in 20 cities, actually in 20 countries, implemented electrical vehicles. And we do actually have 100% zero emission in some of our cities as well. So it is the way to go. And of course, we also want to be that sustainable company as everybody else.
Fantastic. Thank you for that addition. I think that's helpful for everybody to see as well, that this model comes with a lot of thought along the whole chain. How you implement your business. Maybe with that, to Niels Lund from Novo. And what do you think? Why is this 15-minute city an interesting concept to reduce emissions as well as harnessing the quality of life and healthy living of the inhabitants? And maybe you tell us a little more about, well, also the partnership with C40 and how you're going about it.
Sure, and thank you.
The why and the what.
What I think is extremely appealing of the 15-minute city concept is that it's a shift from the functional approach to urban planning to a people-centered approach to urban planning. And then by some magic, it encapsulates and bridges between both the climate and the health agenda. And let me explain that a little bit. In Novo Nordisk, we have been driving a public-private partnership program called Cities Change Diabetes for the last 8 years or so, and for almost as long as we've had a partnership with C40 also. And we've been trying to map both the health benefits and the climate benefits and see how they can be mutually supportive. And when you think about the 15-minute city concept, it does really point to all of those places where, by investing, for example, in walkability, in bikeability, in green spaces, getting the cars out of the neighborhood, cooling down, improving air quality, we both reduce emissions, but certainly also improve the well-being from a strictly health perspective, but also from a broader well-being perspective by having greater cohesion in the community. And therefore, it does really bridge those two specific aspects of climate and health. And so I don't know whether it was a gift from heaven when it was brought forward and we got this aha moment. Because in the 5-6 years of work we've had with C40, we have mapped these co-benefits, and in 2019 we launched a tool called the Walkability and Bicycling Benefits Tool. Very technical. It's basically a spreadsheet that helps cities to estimate what the health benefit of these investments are. So before they venture into these larger investments, what can we expect to get out of it? And more than 20 cities have used it so far. And this we are working with the team here at C40 to expand to a 15-minute city tool, where we will expand the scope of both those climate and the health benefits. So you won't get it on Monday, but maybe somewhat into next year, it will be something that you can actually use to, if you want to really move ahead with these types of interventions and change in the neighborhood, you can actually bring those things forward and know a little bit more about what to expect.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And I think we have all seen how amazing this concept is. There is interest from the private sector, there is support. We have really strong political engagement. You were very clear about the fact it's worth it, but it's complicated. It will not be easy. It comes with all kinds of challenges. I wanted to highlight as well, Rome, there was the C40 Reinventing Cities competition winning project with the Campo Urbano. And just to say, we need to recognize what is being done to encourage everybody, to encourage you to take this forward, to make sure that this is a success. And I think we all can wish you a lot of success in going forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
There's a last word.
There was a last word, because I wanted to say that we want to join the doers and not the delayers. So let's get together on this.
Okay. And one more thought.
We are trying to streamline this concept in all the different policy areas. Also appointed a minister which is in charge of bringing together, and indeed reinventing cities. What has been done and what we are doing is all related to this concept. Polyfunctional, decentralized area where we do urban regeneration and we put together different functions. We do the energy communities across the city. We put the services where they are not, kindergarten, for instance, and we do the urban regeneration projects, putting together these different functions in area where most is needed. So, and we built, for instance, public libraries across the most difficult area of the city, which are a powerful center of culture, inclusion, digitalization, participation of people. So we are trying to put all the various policy area coherent with this concept and bringing together a coherent vision of the future of the city. And what is most important, and this is the last thing I want to say, we are trying to make citizens protagonists of this. So we are going to adopt now a new regulation of the shared use of common goods, where we can do partnerships with NGOs, with associations, with various subjects that can, together with us, manage these common goods and make us this concept to be full not only of things we build, but also of people who becomes protagonists and participate in making our city better.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. You looked at me, we're over time now.
Yeah, but just one line. I was thinking that we can apply to the city of 15 minutes a concept that we used to have for big and complex technological transformation projects, which is think big, start small, scale fast.
Fantastic. It was worth listening to that's our motto going forward. Thank you very much.
That was.
Muchas gracias para todos los panelistas.
Thank you to all panel members.
See that while we're here together, hearing all these very, very interesting and vibrant ideas, there are millions of people that are following us online. And I just want to share with you that during our morning program, we have more than 1 million views from across 35 countries. So that's pretty awesome. And we want to encourage you to keep watching because we have an amazing day ahead. So our next spotlight segment features the Vice Mayor of Chengdu, Linan. Then we will hear about some news and announcements from C40.
尊敬的各位市长、各位嘉宾，大家好！很高兴通过云端出席第8届 C40城市气候领导联盟全球市长峰会。首先，我仅代表成都市政府对本
Honorable mayors, distinguished guests, good afternoon. It is my pleasure to attend the 8th C40 World Mayors Summit virtually. On behalf of Chengdu Municipal People's Government, let me begin by extending my sincere appreciation to C40 and the city of Buenos Aires, Argentina, for hosting the summit. I would like to take this opportunity to explore ways of tackling challenges posed by climate change with you and to share Chengdu's best practices. This summer, frequent and extreme weather events occurred in many parts of the world, while Chengdu suffered from the most extensive drought and high temperature on record. Climate change has been thrust into spotlight once again to protect the Earth, common home of humanity, and actively respond to climate change have become burning issues that brook no delay. As an important part of implementing the global climate policy and taking on the climate action, the Chinese cities are delivering China's dual carbon goal, the solemn promise made by President Xi with actual deeds. Our engagement in global climate governance has continuously contributed the Chinese wisdom, Chinese solution, and Chinese power to the international community for building a clean and beautiful world. In recent years, as a Park City demonstration area and a national low-carbon pilot city, Chengdu has shouldered the great mission of taking the lead in peaking carbon dioxide emissions and achieving carbon neutrality. The city has been committed to pursuing a path of green, low-carbon, and high-quality development, and has actively aligned with the national strategy to address climate change. We have endeavored to build 6 low-carbon systems of industry, energy, city, carbon sink, consumption, and institutional capacity, and reach the goal of double reduction of energy consumption and carbon emission. During the 8th 5-year plan period, Chengdu has achieved an average annual GDP growth of 7.3% at the cost of an annual carbon emission growth of 1.6%. Park City Initiative has been selected as one of the 28 global nature-based solutions to climate change. The green and low-carbon development is gradually becoming Chengdu's distinctive feature, and we value it as the most long-lasting strength. To achieve the dual carbon strategic goal, we should follow the path of moving from low near net zero to net zero carbon emission. We are seeking ways to tailor-make a near net zero carbon program that fits Chengdu's local conditions. The Chengdu pilot program on construction of basically near net zero carbon emission zones released this March marks the launch of the near net zero community construction. We have taken a holistic approach by optimizing spatial layout, improving transportation connection, retrofitting buildings for energy conservation, spreading low carbon technologies, and popularizing the social governance concept based on collaboration and participation to enable residents to enjoy the 15-minute life circle, which is low carbon, convenient, and high quality. This July, Chengdu joined C40's Green and Thriving Neighborhoods Network, becoming one of the first group of pilot cities in the world. With C40's international platform and technical networks, we look forward to working with other member cities to explore new ways of responding to climate change and bringing a bright future of harmony between humanity and nature. At last, we'd like to invite all the member cities to attend the International Horticultural Exhibition 2024 Chengdu, themed City in Parks and Life in Poetries. Let's join hands to write a new chapter of green development with a shared pursuit for global ecological progress.
We are empowering our students to take charge of their future with sustainable ideas and actions.
Tantos jóvenes están interesados y dispuestos.
So many young are involved and interested in involving themselves for a sustainable future.
Nuestro rol, mi rol, y
our role, my role, and your role is to be an active part of the building of our future.
Pave the way in addressing the climate crisis.
I like that the leaders got to see my ideas and what I think of the environment and climate.
The powerful voices of our students. Our next panel will focus on building low-carbon and resilient neighborhoods. So please welcome to the stage Senior Advisor for Urban Development and NREP and former Mayor of Helsinki, Jan Vapor-Biori, Mayor of Seattle, Bruce Harrell, and Mayor of New Orleans, Latoya Cantrell, and our moderator, Ben Smith, Director for Energy and Climate Change at ARU. Bienvenidos.
Well, thank you very much, Vanessa, for the introductions, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. We're going to move straight into a panel conversation. Our panel is really going to continue the theme of the green and thriving neighborhoods, but trying to pick up and highlight really inspiring examples of neighborhood-scale projects that are happening in 3 cities around the world: Seattle, New Orleans, and Copenhagen. So, Mayor Harrell, I'm going to come to you first, if that's okay. I've heard that in Seattle you're updating your One Seattle plan, and that's a new plan that's going to include climate resilience, community health, and much more besides. But what I wanted to ask is, within that, what are some of the kind of urban models or approaches that you've adopted to address the issues of urban sprawl and to reactivate the neighborhood scale in Seattle? Can you explain?
Yes, thank you. And first, let me explain why we say One Seattle. That in Seattle, You know, we sometimes struggle with our differences. Those differences could be based on race or religion or socioeconomic levels. We are a city where we have very wealthy people and often very lower income people as well. And so in this discussion of climate change and housing and transportation, before I took office, we had a lot of very argumentative discussions. And so I think as mayors, we set the tone for discussions. And we first said in One Seattle, we will be the master of listening to one another. And in our climate discussions, that's what we have to do. So we started with the One Seattle concept. And when we struggle with, for example, racial differences in our approach to planning on neighborhoods, we figured out that everyone wants the same thing. They want tree canopy, they want clean water, they want clean air. Seattle has a history of racial segregation, that when I was a child in Seattle, that there were certain areas that certain people, based on how you look, you could not live. And if you still see Seattle, some of those areas where there were poorer communities still lack tree canopy, as an example. So in our planning, the first thing we said we would do is make sure that policy leaders, that we are bringing the right people to the table, that their voices are heard. We call this our race and social justice toolkit, or our lens. It's a filter by which you look at all of your policies, and we make sure that these communities are heard. An example would be when we looked at how we replace street lights. We converted them all from high-pressure sodium lights to LED lights, but we realized as they failed, it was a complaint-based system. Poor communities don't complain as much as richer communities. So it looked as though we were creating a problem in poorer areas. So we shifted that policy, which was fair on the surface, complaint-based, but we recognized that it would make more sense to just do it in quadrants of the city. Now, I know it sounds funny to replace the light when it's still working, but it was actually cheaper to do it that way and more equitable. So in Seattle, we lead with equity, and that is how we do our comprehensive plan updates, and that's how we make sure that in climate change, we realize that there are poorer areas that have higher asthma rates, lower water quality, and we have those communities at the table with me and others forming policy.
Fantastic, thank you. And it's really inspiring to hear you talking about the engagement with the citizens and the listening to each other and how important that is. And I believe that's also a really important aspect of your Resilient Hubs project. So it'd be really great if you could just share some of the details about that project with our audience today.
Thank you. So a resiliency hub, as we call it, we are looking at our assets, whether it's our community centers, our libraries, our parks, our school buildings. And we say in extreme heat or extreme cold weather that we will convert them using solar power, heat pumps, and sustainable forms of energy and tools to be safe places. And again, affluent people in our city, they have expensive air conditioners and other means by which they can have a resiliency hub. But in our resiliency hub, we look at where it matters most to underserved communities. And the beautiful thing is, I think this is a human experience, that we all often care about those less fortunate. So in Seattle, we say if we all agree that we care about those less fortunate, let's use our assets to become resiliency hubs. And in addition to just climate change and climate sustainability measures, perhaps I could bring people in to help mentor and do counseling and teaching other languages, and we could have cultural exchanges in a city. So resiliency with respect to climate change, resiliency with respect to self-development as well.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
In Seattle, we like applause. Thank you very much. We feed off of it.
Give it up. And I think actually, you know, it's interesting, I was just reflecting on some of Mark's earlier comments, because when I hear you describe the resilience hubs, they sound amazing. And I think there's variations of that sort of thing happening in so many cities around the world, so it is really inspiring. Mayor Cantrell, can you hear us? Hey, great to have you here with us virtually. So in New Orleans, I hear that you have an inspiring neighborhood pilot called the Gentilly Resilience District. And I think it'd be really fantastic if you could share with the audience some details about that project. I understand it comprises quite a lot of different initiatives and also will be about revitalizing a historic neighborhood. So if you could tell us a little bit about that, but also specifically how you've engaged with the community there as you've been bringing about the change in the district. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. And again, greetings from the city of New Orleans, and hello to our C40 family and my brother and sister mayors from around the world. The Gentilly community is really comprised of about 11 different neighborhood organizations. It's over 11,000 residents. Our area of the city took on a big hit during Hurricane Katrina. In terms of water sitting there for weeks. And so it was a community that we had to focus on, particularly trying to mitigate flooding during future events, being at the front of climate change. So we created the Gentilly Resilience District. And let me tell you, the world's greatest experts on where they live are the residents themselves. So it has to be a bottom-up approach, especially when you're wanting to engage the residents on projects that meet them where they are and that could store water. So what we have done is a wide range of projects, from blue and green corridors, transforming them major boulevards in a way that will slow and store stormwater. Now, this is about 25 acres of land that we're talking about that stores now 10 million gallons of storm water, but also allowing the spaces to serve as recreation and environmental learning for the community. So we've integrated green infrastructure, recreational improvements, and several key facilities throughout the neighborhood of Gentilly, and schools and playgrounds and the like. And we invest in stormwater management, and also as it relates to homeowners in the community. We're working to train and prepare a local workforce to maintain all of this infrastructure that we put in the ground. And so we're involving our youth as well as local artists in public art placement along the neighborhood's canal and other water features to enhance public understanding of living with water. So again, when you engage the community, it's important because you're building the resiliency of your people. You're showing that you're listening to them, but also they can see that the impact of the project is truly having an impact on their daily quality of life, particularly when storms come our way. And so you're building community, you're building your people, a resilient people, and you're making sure that you're able to sustain your efforts. And you cannot do that if you don't do bottom-up approach, because the people that you bring together in building community are going to be those, your first responders on the ground, as well as to maintain the improvements and investments that you're making as a city.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I've been reading that you use some of your community adaptation program funds to invest directly in improvements in Gentilly district, in home retrofit, but also in green spaces. So I just wondered, can you expand a little bit more about how you did that, and what was the approach, and how did you prioritize the giving out of the grant investment to the residents there?
So we're talking about a $5 million investment and utilizing it from some federal funds that we were able to receive in terms of residential stormwater management improvements to owner-occupied and single-family homes with household incomes at or below the area median income of 80%. So located within the Gentilly Resilience District. So again, not a scattershot approach, making sure that we're going deeper into that community, helping our residents live with water. And this allows the homeowners to capture rainwater or stormwater runoff on their properties. And so this is about 200 properties with an average grant award of anywhere between $10,000 to $25,000. We utilize single contractors, are working on each of these small projects, so it also gives our small businesses, breaking down that money giving the small businesses an opportunity to work in communities and improve just the residents' ability to live with water. Also installed at no cost to the homeowner, meaning in terms of working with these contractors on additional small projects throughout. You know, we also remain open to use natural-based systems in neighborhoods, including $4 million in bond money, funded tree planting, and green space improvements. Also utilizing these dollars to work with churches in the community, helping the churches store and collect their stormwater, freeing it up from running directly into our drains. So it is a multi-pronged approach, working with residents, of course, working with your faith-based community, and also young people in your community. Again, we're building resiliency within our people and sustainability. So this is about blue and green infrastructure and the industries and working with our residents on the ground. So we're seeing tremendous results, but I'm telling you, what this allows us to do is bring people along. So the more residents that get engaged, the more residents that you're going to bring along so that we can continue to invest in other neighborhoods throughout the city of New Orleans. But we're highlighting Gentilly right now, but there are 12 other stormwater projects in terms of these resilience districts throughout our city.
The project sounds amazing, and it sounds like you've got fantastic community engagement around that. So congratulations, and thanks very much for your responses. Jan, I'm going to come to you next, if that's okay. And congratulations also to you, because I hear NREP has committed to becoming carbon neutral by 2028, so well done. And also embracing the 15-minute city concept. So I wanted to ask you specifically, I understand that NREP is bringing forward one of the last sort of urban areas in Copenhagen. So can you just describe a little bit about that project, your vision for it, and for the wider area? That'd be great.
Thank you. Our vision, to put it in a nutshell, is to create, in good collaboration with the city of Copenhagen and C40, a textbook example of what the Carlos Moreno's great idea of 15-minute city could be in reality. So we aim to transform a former railway district to a truly sustainable neighborhood based on net zero buildings and net zero energy systems. But not only that, but also at the same time fostering happy and healthy life. What that then mean in practice? It means, for example, mixing all different types of people, amenities, and architecture, creating social and ecological infrastructure for community building, health, and biodiversity, to connecting everything with green mobility, and especially active mobility, and then, of course, reducing emissions with net zero buildings and energy systems. And doing this with a method of partnering widely in order to create collective action.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to come on to the thing around partnering, because I think you have a quite unique perspective as a former mayor of Helsinki, but now working in a development organization. First of all, it'd be great to hear why you think that neighborhood projects like this can really accelerate climate action. But also, can you maybe just speak a little bit about the opportunity for public-private sector collaboration to enable those projects to happen?
Yeah, concerning neighborhoods, I think that the starting point is to understand that primarily it's not about our homes, but it's about our lives. So it's about developing a city, not building by building, but neighborhood by neighborhood. And just giving one example of what it means in practice, I mean, we all want to promote walking for obvious reasons. But how to do that? You can't force people to walk. Of course, you can create circumstances where people walk more, but actually what you should do, and what would be the ideal model, is to create a neighborhood where people walk more without deciding to walk more. Because it's the natural choice, it's the most pleasant choice. And that is only possible if you have a neighborhood angle neighborhood vision instead of a small one. Concerning collaboration, yes, I'm a former mayor. I work now for the private sector. I know that the private sector think that cities are a little bit maybe slow and bureaucratic. Then on the other hand, cities think that, especially real estate, is maybe a little bit conservative and even a little bit suspicious. I think maybe both have a little bit right here. The point is that we can't afford this kind of thinking anymore in the future. We need a better public-private partnership in order to unlock the resources we have. It's obvious, it's clear, it's evident that only a city can have the overall responsibility of the development of the city. But at the same time, it's evident and clear also that the private sector in general is more innovative. And now we need to find a way where we are like directing or channeling the innovativeness of the private sector to create better neighborhoods, not only better buildings.
Thank you very much. That's fantastic. And thank you all so much for your comments. Yeah. So it falls to me now to close this session. So I think I might stand for this bit, actually. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you very much for all of our panelists for their fantastic insights and for sharing some really inspiring examples of projects from their own cities. I also want to reiterate, Mark has announced today the launch of the Greener Thriving Neighbourhoods programme, but this really is just the start. There's a guidebook online, so please go there, check that out, read through it. It makes for, I think, a really inspiring and positive framework, looking at 15-minute net zero people-centred neighbourhoods. It's a framework and a vision that we really believe in, both at C40 and at Arup and all the other collaborators as well. But as I say, it is only just the start. We are hoping that we will have pilot districts, pilot neighbourhoods in cities all around the world in a few years' time. And that's going to require people to engage with us, to tell us where the examples are of the projects that they're bringing forward, and then for us to build on the sort of very high-level framework that we've established now to develop detailed KPIs and country-specific guidance to fit with the local regulations and policies in those places. So yes, that's just a plea from me, really. Please do, if you have projects that you think would really benefit from fitting within this framework, then reach out, get in touch with the team. We'd love to hear from you. And with that, I'll finish and just say that now we're going to go to a break. I think you have about a 15-minute break now. When you come back, we'll hear a little bit about how we can tackle transport poverty and air pollution. So please take a break and then come back again, enjoy the next session. Thank you very much. I think they changed the clock, right? Thank you.
Well, hello everybody. I know we were going to take a break, but we are pressing on time, so we're just going to continue to the next session. So please stay tuned because this one is going to be really, really good. Okay, it is truly inspiring to hear how mayors and leaders are collaborating and transforming urban centers to the benefit of both people and planet. Now we will move on to the day's second thematic session on tackling transport poverty, air pollution, and climate breakdown. In this session, leading cities and experts will share insights on financing zero-emissions transport, moving away from combustion engines to electric vehicles, and utilizing public transportation to solve social, economic, and environmental challenges. So please welcome to the stage our next guest, President of Latam Division, UITP, Esther Livosky, Mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu, and our moderator, Felipe Ramirez, Urban Mobility Director at WRI. Bienvenidos. Thank you.
Muy buenas tardes.
Good afternoon, everyone. For me, it is a true pleasure to be presiding over this panel with two wonderful women. I will not be emphasizing on introductions or presentations because we only have 10 minutes, so this will be a very dynamic panel, simple, to the point, so that we can tackle the very important points that we have to cover today, which are transportation, particularly focusing on sustainability, green transport, and also something that I find very important, which is talking about people, talking about poverty, and how we tackle the problem of poverty with our transportation systems in order to achieve more inclusive, more sustainable cities that actually provide access to every person in these cities. So without further ado, and just saying that I feel very honored and very pleased to be presiding over this panel. Like I said before, these wonderful women. I would like to start with the mayor of Boston, Mayor Wu.
In Boston in terms of changing a lot of things, especially you have an ambitious plan in order to ensure that 50% of residents are within 3 minutes walk of bike route by 2025. Could you let us know a little bit more about that? And I will go also to the second question, because since we don't have much time, we would love also to hear from your side how you deal with the concerns of drivers in terms of relocating road space from cars. Because, of course, when you have this amazing challenge of having 50% of residents within 3 minutes walk from a bike route, we understand it's going to be very difficult in terms of talking with community, because this means that roads will have less space for cars, which actually it's very impressive and I think is the right way to go. So let us know what's going on in Boston in these terms, and thank you so much for joining us virtually. You're muted, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Buenas tardes, Buenos Aires. Es un honor participar.
It is an honor to be participating here with all of you.
Aunque no pudiera estar allí en persona y me hubiera gustado para estar allí para experimentar el sistema de el subte y todo lo manera de infraestructura, bicicleta, que es un modelo.
The infrastructure with bicycles is really a model for the city, but as a mother,
es muy difícil de tomar viajes largos, entonces es un honor estar virtualmente con ustedes y estoy bien representada en este espacio con nuestro director de Boston Green New Deal, Oliver Sellers Garcia también. Gracias, Director Sellers Garcia. For me, it is a tremendous honor to be taking part with you all. I live these issues personally as a commuter on our public transportation system, which is undergoing some stress right now, as a cyclist, as a mom with kids in our schools. And our vision is for Boston to be a green and growing city. We are a historic city, a dense city already, and that means we need to move more people on the same footprint of infrastructure that is here, to move more people on those same streets with multimodal transit and setting clear goals. We've moved forward on a couple of major pieces. One is to move fast and experiment where possible, measure results so that we can prove what works. We have launched a pilot program with 3 free bus routes that remove financial barriers for the 3 of the busiest bus routes in the city that serve our low-income residents and residents of color, that we have seen really skyrocketing the usage as well as faster speeds to be able to take that model of service improvements and reliability along with affordability to stabilize residents in their communities. We are also setting out to ensure that everyone across the city equitably has access to cycling infrastructure and other improvements. And as you said, it can be a struggle and an intense emotional conversation with residents, but at the city level, Our benefit is that every new project that we move forward on, every way that we are testing, measuring, and then showing what the benefits are, helps us build momentum to keep going.
Thank you so much. It's really amazing, and I think it's going to be a very impressive challenge that we would like to follow after you can reach there, because that's actually what we want in our cities, right? To have more sustainable and inclusive cities. And I would like to ask Esther, sabemos precisamente que después de
We know very well that after COVID, we faced many difficulties when we had to face the drop in demand, of public transportation passengers. And many of them moved to other forms of transportation. And this, unfortunately, affected our goal, our common goal to achieve more sustainable cities and to achieve the electrification of the transportation system. And we know that we cannot speak about the electrification of transport if we do not consider that shift towards more renewable, more sustainable ways of transportation, moving away from the more contaminating forms of transportation. In your position, what do you see and what has happened with that loss of public transportation passengers after COVID, and what do we expect from the world in terms of sustainability of transportation and that assistance that we need to provide to the poorest population? Thank you very much. Unfortunately, and during the pandemic, and especially at the beginning, there was a high level of stigmatization of public transportation, considering a cluster for contagion. And so in many places, people just altogether stopped using public transportation. We could only use public transportation for essential workers, and there was a major drop in demand like never before in history. Scientific studies, we have had many scientific studies analyzing the topic, demonstrated that public transportation was not a cluster for contagion. However, unfortunately, demand continued to be low and continued to reflect this fear. Public transportation, however, continued to bring workers to their site of work. And during the pandemic, where practically no one could go out, public transportation was, in a way, a guardian of mobility. And I'm talking about metro, tramways, buses, subways, etc. So all of the public transportation was essential to communicate our cities during the pandemic. It is true, as you mentioned, that the demand has dropped significantly. And recovering that demand has shown variable scenarios. In Europe, the recovery of demand is already at 100%, between 75% and 100%. So it's practically at full demand. In Asia, it is different because we have certain cities where they're closing down everything and demand drops again to practically zero. But then when the cases are brought under control, things reopen. And in Asia, what happens as a particular characteristic is that it picks up radically, like from overnight, it goes up significantly. And we have many other cities with 100% recovery. This has to do with the fact that Asian cities have extended the transportation networks over the years. And when we compare this with 2019, we are comparing it with smaller networks. In Latin America, the recovery of demand is between 70 and 85%. And in North America is where we're seeing the slowest recovery, because there are many cities and modes of transportation that only recover 35%, and the strongest recovery showed a 75% increase. So we continue to see many people who started walking more, using their bicycle. Of course, this is fantastic. But there are also many people who shifted towards their private cars, their private vehicles, and haven't returned to public transportation. And that's our challenge, attracting them back to public transportation. What we can say about it is that the pandemic has brought a positive effect on the concept of what needs to be done or what we have to do. We know that we need to give the streets back to the people, because in the last 70 years, streets were built more for the circulation of vehicles, for vehicles to park. And now we know that we need to recover them and give them back to the people. During the pandemic, there have been important actions, but we also know that to recover those transportation passengers, public transportation has to be very high quality. Not only must we bring a service that involves buses or high-quality metro transportation, but we need to integrate everything. We need to think about integrated mobility, which includes walking, includes bicycles, and is also integrated with other new mobility services, which, for example, on-demand mobility or shared mobility as well. Ideally, this should all be part of a platform that is user-friendly and where users can see all of the alternatives, the costs of each option, which one is more convenient. And if we offer them high-quality transportation, then we start seeing a possibility to recover demand that has gone or moved towards private cars, or a demand that maybe never existed before in the first place. This panel has a very interesting characteristic, because we have one person involved with the policies directly, and that political intention is absolutely paramount to ensure that things happen. This political will result in projects that involve bike paths so that it can reach everyone in Boston in 2025. And we also have your testimony, which have shown, supported by all these studies, how we can deliver what the world needs and the projections that we have for the future in order to overcome adverse situations such as COVID-19, but others that are even more adverse, such as climate change, which is even larger than what we experienced.
I'd like to say something in addition. What we are needing a lot is for more planning in terms of mobility. It has to be coordinated with urban planning. This is something that is missing in the majority of our cities, and it is absolutely necessary and required. On the other hand, in the transportation authorities, both metropolitan as otherwise, they're very important for us to achieve our goal. And for these authorities have the necessary power, the necessary funding, and also to have regulations enabling them to very nimbly resolve problems. That's important to start having more sustainable mobility in our cities. Thank you so much, Esther. And to close, I'd like to give then the mayor the floor again.
Second thoughts, so we can go to the next panel. You're mute.
Thank you so much. I think that's exactly right about the need to really integrate our approaches. As a city here, all of our growth is potentially limited by or enhanced by our transportation infrastructure. And in terms of the sources of emissions, as a city, more than 71% from the building sector, how we grow, how we connect to the grid, and then the rest, almost all of the rest from the transportation sector. So I really appreciate the chance to connect with everyone and to have a conversation in such an integrated way. And thank you so much for all of your leadership and example.
Muchísimas gracias a todos.
Thank you so much, and we'll go ahead with the next panel, which will enable you to have all this outlook in terms of transportation and other paramount issues. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias, Felipe. Muchas gracias, Esther.
Thank you, Felipe. Thank you, Esther. Thanks to the mayor.
Emissions areas, we feature governing mayor of Berlin, Franziska Giffey.
Warm greetings from Berlin to the C40 Mayors Summit in Buenos Aires. I'm happy to be participating in the panel on sustainable transport development in this way. We all know that clean air and quality of life in our cities go hand in hand. Clean air has a major impact on our physical and mental health. And road traffic is a key contributor to air pollution and climate change. Therefore, Berlin believes that a sustainable transition in the transport sector is the right way forward. And we have ambitious goals. Will I go by bike or public transport or take the car? This everyday question has consequences for our climate. In Berlin, like in other cities, we want to motivate people to use sustainable ways of transport. Berlin has taken an important step in that direction by introducing Germany's first Mobility Act. This law gives priority to public transport, bicycles and pedestrians. We have already taken various measures based on this act. To give people a better alternative to their cars, we are massively expanding Berlin's public transport network. In addition, we are planning to lay up to 180 kilometers of new train tracks to enable more commutes by rail. And also, we are constructing and expanding new train stations. Life is getting more and more expensive these days. Therefore, the transformation of our mobility systems must become even more socially fair. Sustainable transport must be affordable for everyone. And it must be cheaper than transport that is harmful to the environment. In Germany, we offered extremely attractive prices for public transport throughout the summer. This has helped us convince countless new people to become train and bus users. We are now working on a permanent follow-up ticket starting in 2023. In the meantime, Berliners can book a subscription for public transport for about €1 per day. A top priority for us is changing street space in favor of climate-friendly means of transport. We are creating more space for buses, trams, and protected cycling ways. This way, people can move around faster on public transport and be safer on their bikes. Parts of our city will be designated low and zero-emission zones. For this purpose, we will be setting up 4 times as many charging points for electric vehicles in the coming years. Here, we can also count on Berlin's startup scene, which is coming up with innovative ways to support this development. One of my favorite examples is a company that integrates charging points into existing streetlights. We are convinced that climate governance and the transition to other types of mobility will only be accepted if people participate in decision-making. That's one reason why we set up a temporary Citizens' Climate Council to advise policymakers. Aside from that, cooperation with international partners is of utmost importance to us. In the context of C40, for instance, we have signed the Clean Air Accelerator and the Green and Healthy Streets Accelerator. The commitments set out in both declarations are very ambitious. But thanks to the close exchange of ideas with other cities, we have come up with promising practical solutions. In this spirit, I wish you fruitful discussions, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you, and greetings from Berlin.
Wonderful to see all the great work that the mayors are doing around the world. And our next spotlight focus on action taken in Hangzhou, China, featuring Sun Zudong, Deputy Mayor of Hangzhou.
尊敬的女士们、先生们，大家好，很荣幸
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to participate in this year's C40 World Mayor Summit. I am Sun Zudong, the Deputy Mayor of Hangzhou, China. The theme of my speech is Green Transport, Green Travel. As a megacity with a population of over 12 million, Hangzhou has 3,766 million motor vehicles, with average daily traffic exceeding 28 million trips. For this reason, achieving green transport, green travel, is an important part of Hangzhou's urban management innovation. Here I would like to share 4 initiatives that Hangzhou has taken to promote sustainable urban transport. First, policies have played a guiding role to optimize the transport infrastructure. Hangzhou has 2 restricting policies, namely restrictions of vehicle license plates and traffic. Meanwhile, we have prioritized the development of Hangzhou's public transport system. By restricting the use of private motor vehicles and encouraging public transport, a push and pull effect is created to optimize Hangzhou's travel structure. Second, we have advanced non-motorized traffic facilities, enhancing the quality of commuting. Hangzhou commits to advancing non-motorized traffic facilities by emphasizing 8 types of greenways, including those around lakes, mountains, rivers, roads, creeks, and through wetlands, parks, and rural areas. By the end of 2022, it is projected that the total length of greenways in Hangzhou will reach 4,431 kilometers, with the density of greenway in the central urban area reaching 1.5 kilometers per square kilometer. This will make the greenway network available within a 5-minute walk around the city. Third, we have expedited the construction of public transport to meet multiple needs. Hangzhou has been working hard to put in place a 4-sphere integrated urban public transport system with rail transit as the core, bus tram as the base, and aqua bus and public bikes as the complement. Hangzhou's rail transit system operating mileage stands at 516 kilometers, ranking 5th in China. The daily passenger flow is 3.05 million, ranking 6th in China. Fourth, we have built up green transport under the concept of the Green Asian Games. Hangzhou has managed to extend the coverage of clean energy vehicles. The ratio of clean energy vehicles hit 100% in the bus system and 89.9% for taxis. At the same time, specific operations on wheelchair-accessible passages have been carried out at the same time to create a barrier-free transit environment, making green transport more accessible for special groups. By comprehensively promoting barrier-free and senior-friendly transformation of green transport facilities, Hangzhou has made green travel friendly to people of all ages. Hangzhou has also strengthened publicity and guidance, making green travel deeply rooted in people's minds. Green travel lifestyle is taking shape. The contribution rate of green travel has surpassed 75%, while the satisfaction rate has reached over 90%. Distinguished guests, the exploration and practice of Hangzhou in the field of sustainable transport that I mentioned is a review of Hangzhou's efforts to develop a green travel demonstration city and the epitome of Hangzhou's integrated development of non-motorized travel and public transport. We hope that our future efforts will further enhance green travel in cities and contribute more Chinese wisdom and solutions to the world. Finally, I wish the C40 World Mayors Summit be very successful. Thank you very much.
Muy bien. So we have just seen some great examples of transformative transformation actions in progress. So let's hear from city residents who share through the hashtag United in Action what they think is the best policy for their cities. Julia, de Santiago de Chile, would like to close some streets for cars and let only bikes go by, and that's a wonderful idea. While Surendro in Jakarta thinks cities need integrated zero-emissions public transportation. Our next panel will highlight the mechanisms and solutions required for financing the transition to sustainable transportation in cities. So please welcome to the stage our panelists, Mónica Arraya, Distinguished Fellow at the Climate Works Foundation, advising the drive electric campaigns. Communication Director for ITPD, Verónica Ortiz Cisneros, and the Mayor of Sao Paulo, Ricardo Núñez. Y también nuestro moderador, Nicolás Estupiñán.
Our moderator, Nicolás Estupiñán.
Of Latinoamérica. Bienvenidos.
Bueno, muy buenas tardes a todos. Muchas gracias.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us in this session regarding the different challenges that we are facing. It is a pleasure to have Veronica and Monica, who is joining us virtually. This is one of the main topics that we have in the transportation sector, and we are very interested in knowing about the best practices for three reasons, mainly. First of all, transportation, roadway transportation, is the main source of local pollution and local contamination. It is responsible for about 1/3 of the global emissions, causing all of the effects of climate change. We have a very complex international context with rising inflation, rising gas prices. And in Latin America, we have a pattern for consumption that is quite different from what is happening in the rest of the world. We consume about 39 gigajoules of energy, approximately 35% of which has to do with transportation. This compared to about 85, which is consumed in Europe, and 160 in the United States. So there is an energy gap and a gap in the access to basic services and transportation that is very relevant. So my question to the panelists is the following. In this international context and transportation being so important and with so much weight in terms of global pollution, how can Latin America continue to be the leader in decarbonization of transportation and make a shift towards being a leader, a world leader in decarbonization of transport? And what are the challenges faced in order to achieve this goal? So Veronica, we'll start with you. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Nicolás. At ITDP, we have a report that was published recently called Electrified Cities, the Road Towards 1.5 Degrees. And in a way, it describes a model that combines compact cities with electrification in the mobility community and in the electrification community, because sometimes it seems that these are like parallel conversations that do not overlap. And in this report, the evidence shows that there is no one single way to achieve a 1.5 degree scenario in 2040, which involves only if we do this, if we do that. When we talk about electrification, we must speak about compact cities, and the electrification community and the compact city communication has to refer to electricity as a source. So these are very ambitious scenarios. We are talking about an acceleration and a very fast-paced shift towards these elements. But in Latin America, we have many examples that can be taken as an inspiration, as a reference, and as a basis to scale up. It can include innovation, implementation, and now we are at the point of scaling up. We have many things in our favor, one of which is that the model already exists. The institutional infrastructure that allows a scaling up of the financing and the implementation of public infrastructure in order to achieve better public transportation and more infrastructure to allow walking and biking, they are there already. What we need to do is just scale up the model to, of course, a larger scale. Examples of public policies and of compact cities, such as the use of the soil, have been in Latin America for many years. In Curitiba, in Brazil, they were pioneers in implementing and in daring to cross that unpopular line with the politicians, yes, which is the change it was land use change. In Bogota, in Mexico City, they have shown a very strong willpower and very strong models that have actually worked, and which allow us to grow the bike infrastructure exponentially. Bogota has already about 600 kilometers of bike lanes, and they have just launched a public bicycle system. And they are about to include more stations, more bicycles, both electrical and non-electric. And in the city of Mexico, they are about to reach those levels. We have 500 kilometers of bike lanes. And we are seeing a fast-growing expansion of the public bicycling system, with more bicycles being included in the next few months. I think that the major challenge and what we're lacking is to overcome our prejudice, our preconceptions with maybe not so popular policies. An example of this is Sao Paulo. Sao Paulo has an integrated master plan that combines many of these policies all in one plan, and they are in the process of fighting to disencourage the use of cars, and the policies for parking reflect this, or it is reflected in the way that buildings are constructed, and also, by charging for parking in the street. Rio de Janeiro is also implementing areas specifically for low emissions, making also unpopular decisions. Bogota has a 30-year master plan, which will surely be a legacy for future generations. So there are challenges in the funding system, in the financing system, and I think that what we can do in that regard is try to find and try to innovate and try to look for non-traditional funding sources, public funding, for example, bank loans, but also look for maybe investments using carbon credits and other innovative systems. I think Mayor Núñez may be in a position to speak more about this.
Yes, Mayor. We always look for that political commitment when we talk about solutions in these fora, which are possible to the extent that there is political will and commitment. Having you here is really such a pleasure. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing in Sao Paulo to be a leader in decarbonization?
Oportunidade de poder estar aqui. Acho que é a cidade de São Paulo que tem esse compromisso tão forte com as questões de sustentabilidade.
I believe that the city of Sao Paulo took on this let's say, challenge in terms of sustainability. We are really proud of leading and being an example for many cities in Brazil and the world. But I do have some issues, and these are questions to share with you all, really. There are two stages during this process. The first stage is that of the discourse proposal, is talking, the dialogue, and then we go on to the next stage, which is the doing, the acting. In other words, to have very compelling actions that will enable us to be at a level to actually see to and to care for sustainability and environmental issues. And I say this because we have Marta Suplicy, who was a mayor between 2001 and 2004. When she was a mayor back then, she had a vision, a 30-year vision, and 30 years onwards, She went through all the bus trajectories. She instituted in the city of Sao Paulo, which is a region with 48% of coverage area, the APAs, which are called environmental protection areas. They are limited as environmental protection areas with specific care. In other words, they have Atlantic type of vegetation. Things started working. There are some managers that have a greater or less commitment, too much speech and not so much action, and the other way around as well. What we did with our team was to implement and deliver actions. An important factor to share with you is that we created a special climate change secretariat within the mayor's office. We have education, health, and agriculture, and we have also a climate change secretariat. All of these that speaks to all these secretariats. Yesterday, actually, we received a Bloomberg report on this sustainable issues. In other words, a special snack with more fruits, with more vegetables, with less trans fats. And when speaking about electrification, this is what we posed, because we need also a societal cultural change to understand the importance of having this sustainable vision. We have 98% of our light bulbs that are 700,000 points that were changed by LED lamps. They represent 52% of cost reduction. We're creating a notion in the population, an environmental care culture. We have 13,000 buses in our fleet. It is a city with 12.5 million inhabitants. It's the fourth greatest city in the world. And given that context, as you very well mentioned when you started speaking, in other words, which were those items that create greater issues or problems in terms of GHG emissions, and that is public transportation. We changed the electric bulbs with organic agriculture. But if we don't have a specific attention to transportation, we will be wasting our time with all these goals in terms of GHG reductions. 62% of those carbon dioxide emissions come from those vehicles that transit São Paulo. Half of them are from public transportation buses. They're diesel buses, highly polluting, and they go around the city all day. When we have a policy of reducing GHG gases, emissions, we need to have compelling ideas. In our goals, we will change 20% up to the end of my administration or mandate, which is the end of 2024. But we had the pandemic, so these goals had to be expanded. And this came out in the main newspapers in Sao Paulo. So we made the decision that from now on, we forbid buses or to include diesel buses in our fleet. So we substitute those buses, and this could only be done by electric buses. Thus, we effectively have a specific action to reduce GHG emissions. Now, per year, we changed 1,000 buses. We have a certain legislation that says that buses can only be 10 years old. And so when the 10 years are up, we have to exchange them. We exchange 10,000 per year. And now all the buses that have been replaced to come into the fleet, they cannot be diesel buses. They must be electric buses. And so the issue here is that people say this is very expensive, but we do have an expectation, mainly when we talk about batteries. We could discuss this, of course, in the industry and for the price to go down. But to the extent that that doesn't happen, we showed then the dealers some numbers and the concessionaires, and we did the math, and we understood how important C40 was. It funded a project which was called Zebra, providing some studies in terms of the efficiency gains in our fleet. C40 also funded our municipal climate plan, which is called the climate plan. So C40 helped in all our actions when we made that alliance, and today I had a very good dialogue with another mayor to expand these actions. And when we transform them into effective measures, we move on. We spoke about buses. And I will talk about my country, of course, Brazil, so that you have an idea that we have $1 is 5 reais, and a typical bus of 85 passengers costs 700,000 reais. An electric bus standardized for 85 passengers costs 2.5 million reais. But the diesel bus has a life cycle of 10 years. The electric bus lasts 15 years. The diesel cost is 25,000 reais per month. And so if you do that same circuit with an electric bus, the cost is 5,000 reais. So you have a gain over time, an investment reduction, but there is a greater investment in terms of environmental issues that have to do with your health. So if we do away with those gases, we also diminish diseases, mainly respiratory diseases. I think we are in the right path, very committed. We have a lot to do yet, and we have this commitment by the population in terms of the environment very much aligned along these lines, and we are aligned those two, the C40. Thank you very much. Monica Araja is with us virtually. Monica, from your standpoint as an international and global expert, what are your recommendations for Latin America? It's so good to see you again. Yes, it's great seeing you, Nicolás, Verónica, and the mayor of São Paulo. She's going to speak Portuguese.
Voy a hablar en español, soy Tica.
I'm going to speak in Spanish. I'm Tika, and I work in an international company who wants to accelerate electrification in all segments. So I love the fact that C40 is in Latin America because, as Nicolás said, we have to think big. And this will be the key for the important question of funding, because funding is what will enable that scaling up. There's several things, and I would like to build on the very good ideas by Verónica and by the mayor of São Paulo. I loved your interventions because we are in a very good moment despite the complicated issues. So in electric buses, my proposal is to think about it as something that will accelerate many other things. Firstly, it is the entry point to Latin America to grow the electric mobility story in taxis and maybe also in trucks, in fleets. So we must, from now on, start thinking very well about the positive implications this will have in order to include other segments. So bringing the other partners from other segments. Number two, it is really a climate action accelerator because since we go in this way with an electricity issue, this will enable us to attract, to appeal companies, the companies we have with renewable energy. We are at a very hard moment, internationally speaking. It's like a war. We have a war that has a lot to do with the energy model we have. Another very important point, and which is also good news, is that right now the region is undergoing a very delicate moment, economically speaking. And of course, we have to have the magic of the city, the story of this new urban history, and also include the economic story. We have to give numbers to this story in job creation, in intelligent recharges. Here in Europe, it's been shown that jobs are being created not only through renewable energy taking it into the transport, but also in intelligent infrastructure creation. Not only buses, there will also be trucks and commercial fleets as well. Now, what have we learned internationally in regions like, for instance, here in Europe or in China or in places like California? Relatively speaking, this is something that we don't see in the region. So we have to use public policies, regulatory ones, to start sending those signals to those who sell such technologies. I am Tika, and I have a foot in Latin America very well placed, and another one in Europe. I've realized, Nicolás, Verónica, and Mr. Mayor, that we basically have a dilemma we have to solve, and that is that the region wants to purchase electric buses, the region wants to purchase electric trucks, and also electric vehicles. And even so, me being in Europe, many of the companies that sell these models tell me that in Latin America and in developed countries, there is no demand, there is no interest, that we still want to continue purchasing diesel, which is fake. So my point is that just creating regulatory frameworks that are more formal, sending a signal from the cities, Santiago, Bogota, Sao Paulo, and also public policies, national public policies that say, just wait a minute, we know that in the region the future is not gas or diesel. We want to even place a date. From these dates on, we should do that transition of zero emissions. And this, as a region, answering to Nicolás, how to think big and to say also the supply has to change. We're sending these demand signals, which was taught by the Zebra Project. There is demand, especially by all mayors, but in turn, we need to have conversations, sometimes hard conversations, not always, but sometimes they are, with those who are sending such technologies, delivering them, so that there's no divergence in terms of our histories, which is uncomfortable sometimes. We don't want to have polluting technologies. I can talk even more, but I think that we want to listen to others speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are out of time, unfortunately, but I think that what I'm taking home with me are very clear concepts. As Monica said, we need to build a stronger narrative from Latin America to continue decarbonizing transportation. I think we need to reinforce and build that narrative. And we need to continue shining light on these initiatives because our commitment is strong. The example of Sao Paulo, all cars should be electric. Bogota is another example, made the same decision. I think many cities in Latin America are going down the same path. Put your money where your mouth is, as they say in the United States. So I think we're in the right direction. Compact cities, non-motorized transportation, we need to continue investing on decarbonization. And I think this also has to do with having a stronger articulation, the use of soil, and continuing strengthening our non-motorized alternatives. Thank you very much.
Esteemed representatives of the C40 member states, I, Ekrem İmamoğlu, as Mayor of Istanbul, would like to salute you with amity and C40 member cities, I, Ekrem İmamoğlu, as Mayor of Istanbul, would like to salute you with amity and respect on behalf of myself and Istanbulites. This constitutes the central theme of our recently finalized Istanbul 2050 vision. Istanbul 2050 vision document is a program that challenges 5 essential crises whose traces can be found on the global, national, local, and urban levels now, but will shape the future. These are 1. Governance and democracy, 2. Economy and development, 3. Ecology and environment, and 4. Environment, urban environment, transportation and infrastructure, and finally, social welfare and justice. Objectives and targets have been set under the themes of city that protects the environment and adapts to the changing climate. Istanbul, aiming to be carbon neutral and resilient city by 2050. One of the main policies of the Vision 2050 strategy document to achieve the aim of climate-sensitive, nature-friendly, effective and inclusive mobility in 2050 has been shaped by the Istanbul Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan. In line with these, it is aimed to make Istanbul a climate-sensitive and nature-friendly city by prioritizing low-carbon emission transportation modes and practices. Principles of safety, inclusivity, and environmental sensitivity in the urban transportation system of Istanbul are the transportation policies of Vision 2050. This plan, which is the first sustainable urban mobility plan in Turkey, is also the first mobility plan in the world to be implemented in a mega city with a population of over 15 million. We aim to increase the share of sustainable transportation types such as pedestrian, bicycle, and public transportation from 68% to 90%, the share of trail systems in public transportation from 25% to 50%. We also aim to increase the low emission area size, which does not exist yet. In order to establish sustainable urban transportation and develop public transportation with a rail system focus, work is ongoing at the same time on 10 rail system lines in Istanbul. It is aimed to build a rail system network approximately 800 kilometers across Istanbul. Istanbul is committed to achieving strong targets for sustainable transportation in line with the fight against the climate crisis. I invite all cities to act together with common efforts and grow this mobilization movement.
Muy importante, muchas gracias.
Very important indeed. We thank the mayor of Istanbul, Ekrem İmamoğlu.
Of this thematic session, expert panelists will discuss the importance and urgency of reducing reliance on fossil fuel cars in cities. So please welcome to the stage our panelists, Lina Fedirko, Associate Director of Road Transportation at the Climate Works Foundation. Shaikh Faisal Noor Tuposh, Mayor of Dhaka South. and Paula Rivas Villarroel, presidenta del Sindicato de Profesionales y Técnicos de Metro S.A. y representative of the International Transport Workers Federation. And our moderator, Carlos Monge, Undersecretary for Transport Policy as U.S. Department of Transportation. Welcome, bienvenidos.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Though you spelled. Good afternoon. I would like to welcome you to our panel to explore how cities can encourage more transit, walking, cycling, and greater uptake of zero-emission vehicles. I'm joined by three panelists who are on the front lines, improving how our cities move more effectively, more equitably, and more cleanly. I'm Carlos Monge. I'm the Undersecretary of the Department of Transportation in the United States. I'm the #3 official in the agency, and I supervise policy, innovative finance, research, and international affairs. I'm very excited to be at a convening of mayors because my boss is Pete Buttigieg, who is himself a mayor of a small town in South Bend, Indiana. And his boss is Mitch Landrieu, who is a mayor of my hometown in New Orleans, Louisiana. I have to tell you that mayors are my favorite politicians, and it's because they don't have the luxury of being very partisan. They have to fix problems or face angry constituents, either in the grocery store or on the streets. They have a genetic predisposition to be impatient and be willing to try new things. And without fail, if you spend 5 minutes with a mayor, at some point they're going to pull out of their pocket a map. And the map is a project, but really it's a dream. And it's, what if we fixed this road? What if we restored this transit line? What if we brought this part of town that's next to the railroad tracks up to snuff? Mayors are visionaries. They are hustlers. And throughout history, it's those people who have changed the world and made history. Thanks to two landmark pieces of legislation in the United States, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act, the federal government now in the U.S. is willing to now and able to meet those visionaries where you are and to bring those visions from the wish list to the construction schedule. We are carrying out the most significant investment in infrastructure and jobs in our lifetimes, and we're providing historic funding for transit, active transportation, and micromobility. We're building out a nationwide network of electric vehicle chargers. In short, we have developed a plan to decarbonize the U.S. transportation sector and finally have the resources to do it. And we're not only engaging domestically, but thanks to President Biden's leadership, we're engaging again on the global stage on these issues. At the Department of Transportation, we've launched an initiative called Momentum. It's focused on taking all of our technical assistance resources and making it easier for our partners around the globe to find them. With that, I'd like to bring our panelists into the conversation, and starting with Mayor Tapos. Under your leadership, Dhaka South has launched new bus lines, regulated rickshaw drivers, and modernized the central bus terminal. What is your vision for clean and healthy streets in your community? Thank you, Mr. Carlos. I would start with the words that you were saying about mayors being doers, actually. We have to do everyday work and put the right things to the people of our locality. I come from Bangladesh. The capital is Dhaka, and I represent Dhaka South. With Dhaka South and Dhaka North, we cater to about 10 million people, more than 10 million people.
Yeah.
So you understand it's very challenging. I would express my greetings from the people of Dhaka, especially to Buenos Aires and to Mayor Hareta, and of course C40 Chair, Mr. Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London. With that, I would say that it's very challenging, but we are working hard. Actually, as has been discussed all day long, that we are at the stage or the brink of our era where we have to give back to nature. We have to invest back to nature. That, I think, is the main motto to achieve what we all are seeking to achieve, that is the reducing the impact of climate change. And Bangladesh is one of the most vulnerable countries in the world, which is having the serious impact of climate change.
So Dhaka being the capital is not away from that. So we are, first of all, with the foremost agenda, we are formulating an integrated city master plan for Dhaka for the next 30 years. So for 2020, till 2050. And with that, under that master plan, we are seeking to make the city more pedestrian friendly, having more walkways, more bicycle lanes. We are excavating canals, creating about 30 kilometers of walkways so people can walk. We are creating water bodies so that people can travel by water transportation. At the same time, we are modernizing the public transport, as you mentioned, the bus system. Our bus system is very medieval, I would say.
Medieval?
So, medieval at this stage. So we are trying to bring out the latest technology so that it's efficient and it's low emission at the same time. And that's how we were working to make Dhaka a more pedestrian friendly, more green, and more healthy city. Because you, of course, understand that if you walk, if you bicycle, we also have, needless to mention, we also have rickshaw. You may know that it's a pedaling system where one person pulls two other persons. It's a three-wheel bicycle.
Active transportation,
not a bicycle,
low carbon.
Tricycle. It's a
Yeah,
tricycle.
that's right.
Yeah. So that's a very traditional transportation in our country, in our city. So we're working on that as well. So all these integrated things will create an atmosphere where we can go low carbon emission, zero emission by 2050.
Excellent. Lena, as you see all these communities that are trying to leapfrog and make these clean transport investments, what is the role of philanthropy in helping make that transition? And do you have any advice for folks who are watching about how to take advantage of the opportunities that might be there?
Thanks so much for that question, Carlos. Firstly, so happy to be here with all very impressive mayors doing the work on the ground. From philanthropy's point of view, I like to say that we're sort of like the ant in the family that's helping the family make the meal, but keeping everything peaceful. And the reason I say that is because we actually have to work with a lot of different stakeholders to make sure that there's alignment, and we do so by helping governments adopt smart policies. We encourage businesses, private sector, to be more ambitious in electrifying and cleaning up their supply chains. And then we support people power coalitions to hold governments and private sectors accountable to the people that they serve. And we do all of that by focusing on two things, electrification and compact cities that really go hand in hand. And the way that we sort of engage cities is through partners such as C40, and enabling projects that really focus on this convergence of electrification and compact cities. And examples would be zero-emission areas that some of you have heard about, electrification of delivery vehicles and also service vehicles, also electrification of rickshaws and two-wheelers and so on and so forth. And the one thing that I sort of keep coming back to in observing how our partners work in cities and the types of ambition that cities have and what they're able to do with it is curb management. That is the single most important thing that cities have jurisdiction over and that can really make a difference. And specifically what I'm referring to is you got to take away that free parking in your major European and American cities. And then in our emerging economy partners, you really have to start thinking about prioritizing the most vulnerable folks traveling on the roadway. So you have your pedestrians, you have your cyclists, your three-wheelers, two-wheelers, and so on.
That's really fascinating. In the U.S., it is a new space for philanthropy to get involved with infrastructure. Really excited that we're pushing there, and really appreciate the role of regranters who have the expertise and the experience and contacts on the ground. Paula, the Santiago Metro carries 2.5 million people a day and was chosen as the best underground system in the Americas. And in 2017 announced that you would shift most of your energy to solar and wind sources. How's that transition going, and how can we make sure that workers are at the front end and can participate in that revolution?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for this invitation to this space where, of course, we have the important players who do have an important relevance in city development and therefore real impacts in cities. Now, to your question, first, just to put you into context, the climate change is not restricted to carbon emissions. That's been very clear in this summit. It also goes to a socioeconomic and environmental crisis. I'd like to refer, before answering your question, I'd like to refer to something that does have a bearing, and it's something that we coined, we workers, that has to do with a just transition and climate change. Sometimes they say, what does this fair transition have to do with climate change? And to give you a context, to participate in transformation processes that workers could actively participate there with dialogue. We invite everyone to participate in this social dialogue with the government authorities, with the employers, and of course with workers at the table. There is a commitment from the Santiago Metro for 2025 to be carbon neutral. We have 95% progress made. So let's say we have a photovoltaic, and we also have a wind system in the north of Chile that provides the energy. And this goes to that direction. And why is it important when we think about public transportation? Why is it important for cities? It is important because we need to emit less GHGs, and therefore we need to transport people in environments that are user-friendly, also with environmentally friendly types of systems. Now, how do we get people out of the cars after the pandemic? How do we recover the demand of the citizens so that they can come back to public transportation? It is a challenge. All cities have such challenge, basically. And I think it's related to how we can improve effectively the transportation for our citizens. Of course, this requires investment. What we need is to improve. I work in the Santiago Metro, so we have 140 kilometers of lines. Let's say we have new projects, 136 stations. We already have one underway. We're also doing some expansions, 2 projects that are in the engineering stage. So the city becomes more democratic. People can therefore go from one place to another faster and safer. This also builds trust, but it's got to be a little more global. That is, that buses should also operate appropriately, and we must combine and be part of the intermodality. This means that people should leave their cars in parking lots, be able to take metros or go by bike. There is a project at Metro that has to do with a zero line. What does it mean? In all our metro stations, we should have a space, safe spaces, so that the users can reach there by bike, leave their bikes there, and go to the mass transport system to encourage it, or maybe they can reach their places by foot. The idea is to encourage public transportation, and here we have the great dilemma. How do we make people go back to public transportation, or how do they enchant them so that it makes sense for them? It's not just the climate, but they also have a direct benefit.
Across the United States are facing as well. We're at 70%, 80% of ridership before the pandemic. We have to bring them back in order to make sure that these communities thrive. I want to shift a little bit to, also I'll note that the centrality of transportation to society and human life was most on display in Santiago in 2019 with the protests that were sparked because of the fare increase and how important transportation is to these issues. Mayor, in Bangladesh, the summers are getting hotter, winters are getting shorter, monsoon season extended. How are you thinking about being a city that's both on the leading edge of clean transport investments and fighting, and at the same time fighting those impacts of climate change at the same time?
Yes, you see, earlier we used to have 6 seasons in our country. The monsoon being the most vital season. It used to be of 2 months, but now due to climate change, it has gone up to 4 months. Last year we had rain on every single day for 120 days, continuously, 120 days.
Wow.
So that creates a lot of health hazards. As you may have heard about fever like dengue. And things like that. So we have to overcome those challenges. So we are, as you mentioned about the transport sector, that this is one part wherein we have to go for sustainable transport, wherein the climate impact can be diminished, can be reduced. And so we are having this integrated city master plan wherein every sector is being considered. As I mentioned, that healthy streets are very important. And what do you understand by healthy streets? Which enhances the health of our citizens. Like if people walk, if people use bicycle, if people use transportation which are efficient and which reduces carbon emission, those are healthy in the long run, those are healthy for the citizens. It reduces diabetics, it reduces hypertension, it reduces heart attacks, brain strokes, and other non-communicable diseases. So considering all these things, we are working to radicalize or change the transport system. We have a goal of reducing fossil consumption by about 20% within this decade. And that's why we have concentrated on the bus sector to make it a more efficient transport, public sector transportation for our citizens. We are also having the mass rapid transit, the MRT, metro rail that we call, that will commence from December this year. So that will also help people to communicate in a more efficient way with less fuel consumption and less carbon emission.
Excellent. I'm afraid we're out of time. But I want to thank the 3 panelists here for their leadership from the philanthropic, municipal, and the labor sectors, and thank all of you for sticking through this afternoon. It is a wonderful moment of opportunity, and in the United States we have more opportunity than ever and more resources than ever, but the window is getting shorter and shorter, and really appreciate the leadership that you're doing to show us the way. So thank you.
Thank you.
Gracias. Muchas gracias a nuestros panelistas y a cada.
Thank you very much to our panelists for the moderation of such an important panel.
Very small break before today's final thematic session on putting people first in the green energy transition. So you have 15 minutes to have some coffee, and I will see you here at 4:40. Bienvenidos de regreso. ¿Cómo están?
Welcome back. How are we all doing? Are we all awake or not? All right.
Everyone here in Buenos Aires and also to our online audience for the final thematic session in the day's program. Our next session focuses on strategies for putting people first in the green energy transition, outlining the urgent need to clean sources of energy for the sake of our planet, alongside the opportunities for good green job creation and creating thriving communities. Here to share groundbreaking new research from C40, please welcome to the stage Rachel Huxley, Director of Knowledge and Learning at C40. Bienvenida, Rachel.
Good afternoon. Thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here in Buenos Aires. I'm here to talk about the research that we've been doing looking at the impacts of fossil fuels in comparison to renewable energy. Last year, we looked at the consequences of coal-fired power, starting with coal first, as it is the single biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions globally. Our research found that as well as catastrophic climate impacts, coal causes hundreds of thousands of premature deaths across our cities. Having looked at coal, we wanted to understand the impact of fossil gas. There is new evidence that fossil gas has much greater GHG and air pollution emissions than previously thought. Hence why we are calling it fossil gas and not natural gas, which gives the false impression that it is somehow green and clean. And fossil gas has often been presented as a green fuel. However, it largely consists of methane, a very potent greenhouse gas. And the climate advantage of fossil gas becomes marginal if even around 3% of this escapes into the atmosphere before being burned. And growing evidence is showing that methane leaks are much more substantial than previously thought, and this greatly increases the climate impact of fossil gas. We know that globally we are not on track to meet 1.5 degrees. There is an emissions gap between current national climate pledges and our 1.5 degree goal. And we wanted to understand the role of fossil gas in this emissions gap. So we modeled the contribution and found that it causes 6% of the gap in 2035, and this grows to 10% in 2050. And this is looking at fossil gas use as per national climate pledges. However, instead of declining gas use in line with these climate pledges, national governments and the fossil fuel industry are planning expansions that will add a huge amount to fossil gas use capacity. And already, a third of these are under construction. So the stark reality is that whilst fossil gas use under current national pledges is already a problem, planned expansions make this much, much worse. Across C40 cities, our research shows that we need to swiftly decline fossil gas use by 30% by 2035 to be on track for 1.5 degrees. But instead of this decline, these planned expansions will add 86% to fossil gas capacity. So we can clearly see that fossil gas is incompatible with our 1.5 degree goal. Fossil gas has also been presented as clean. However, again, there is growing evidence that it causes much more air pollution than we thought. So we modeled the impact on air pollution and the resulting health burden. And to our surprise, that showed that fossil gas use causes almost as many premature deaths as coal. Our analysis shows that fossil gas results in nearly 36,000 premature deaths. And beyond premature death, we see the impact in terms of cases of asthma in children, preterm births, emergency visits, years of life lived with ill health, and millions of sick days taken as a result of fossil gas-related air pollution. And with growing fossil gas use, these health impacts only increase. By contrast, If we switch to clean energy solutions, this could avoid over 217,000 premature deaths by 2035 and the other associated health impacts, and over 776,000 premature deaths by 2050. That's a lot of lives at stake for our citizens in our cities. Important to note here is that this research only looks at outdoor air pollution. Due to complexity and data limitations, indoor air pollution was not included, nor was transport-related fossil gas use. So the impacts that I'm talking about today are an underestimate of the full damage that fossil gas is wreaking on our cities. Having understood the harmful impacts of fossil gas, we wanted to see if a switch to clean energy was viable as well as desirable. We worked with Bloomberg to use the latest data to look at the cost of fossil gas compared with renewables. And we found that renewables are already cheaper in all but one C40 city. This is already today, and what we see when we look at price trends is that while gas prices are soaring, renewables continue to drop. Wind and large-scale PV have declined by 51% and 85% over the last decade or so. In a very few years, renewables are on trend to be cheaper everywhere. We also wanted to understand the employment impact of fossil gas use compared with a clean energy transition. And we see that every million invested in utility-scale renewables would generate 1.7 times as many jobs as the same investment in fossil gas power plants. An investment in residential retrofit and residential solar could generate 6 times as many jobs. As well as providing more jobs, clean energy also offers the opportunity for a just transition by reducing energy poverty and increasing energy access. This data shows clearly that fossil gas is no longer a good investment from an economic or an employment perspective. The last part of the research was to look at what cities are already doing, and this is my favorite part because there are so many inspiring examples of the action that cities are already taking to lead the clean energy transition. Here are just 3 of the many great examples. In Los Angeles, we see how they're phasing out 3 fossil gas power plants following similar phase-outs of coal. And at the same time, they have developed the largest solar and battery energy storage system in the US. In Barcelona, they've installed energy efficiency measures in homes experiencing energy poverty, decreasing bills by 19%, equating to a saving of €225 per year. And in Johannesburg, they have plans to increase energy access for their 180,000 households in informal settlements, including installing independent power grids running on renewable energy. And there are many more examples of city action in the report, which is available on the C40 Knowledge Hub. So, in conclusion, it's clear, whilst the findings of our research starkly demonstrate that the current reliance on fossil gas is completely incompatible with our 1.5-degree goal, cities are already showing that clean energy alternatives are possible. At this pivotal moment, with a global energy crisis and cost of living pressures, cities can once again lead by taking action and smart choices to show that clean energy is the best solution for our climate, for our health, and for our economy. And it's the only investment that puts planet and people first. Thank you. Thanks very much. I'd now like to invite our panelists to come on stage for our next conversation, Renewable Cities, Inclusive Cities. And it's my pleasure to welcome Max Levitsky, Director for Green Workforce for Solar One, a not-for-profit that delivers education and training, helping individuals and communities to become more sustainable and resilient. And it's my pleasure to introduce Mayor Abu Taleb of Rotterdam and Mayor Williams of Zwanenburg. Please, sorry. I don't need my clicker anymore. Wonderful. This conversation is an opportunity to hear more about where I left off, the fantastic examples of action that have already been taken on the ground in cities and by cities and by other organizations to really lead a clean energy transition. And as I said, this is my favorite part because as someone who has to deal with the depressing climate data most of the time, really the hearing about the examples and the action that's taken by cities and others is the thing that gives me most motivation and I think us most hope at C40. So thank you so much for being here today, but thank you more for all of the work that you do the rest of the time. And I'd like to start, if I may, by a question to you, Mayor Williams. What does accelerating the energy transition mean for a city like Schwane?
Well, a few months ago, we adopted what is known as Climate Action Plan, and it's for the city to work towards this energy smart and is at the forefront of what we call just energy transition, meaning that everyone will have access to reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy. But I just need to make it clear, when you speak about just energy, you can't move from a state where you use pollutants like coal to produce energy and then move to a perfect state where you now use clean energy. There's going to be a transition, and transition means you might have an intermediate phase, like, for example, using natural gas. Because from our perspective, City of Schwane, a large part of our revenue is generated from reselling electricity that is supplied by a state-owned enterprise. And 90% of the energy that they generate from coal-fired power stations. So we can't just say we're going to give up on this revenue and we're going to adopt clean energy. And if you look at the tariffs that's offered to cities by independent power producers, producing energy from solar or wind it's much higher. So it means that the city will then have reduced revenue. So it's fine that you can have reliable energy, but the problem is it will not be affordable. So you can't go from one state directly over to the next state. For me, just energy means just energy transition means you have another stop along the way where you have to use something else. So we also have introduced other programs, like we've got a bus rapid transport system, and 30% of our buses use CNG compressed natural gas. And we're also speaking to the Development Bank of South Africa so that the rest of our fleet will then will then have electrification, and we will no longer use diesel for the rest of the fleet. And then we also have 2 coal-fired power stations that the city owns, but these power stations haven't been running for the past 10 years. But that also means we've got an extensive grid because the city is quite big, 6,300 square kilometers. So we can repurpose the grid for the use of clean energy like solar and also biogas, for example, instead of using natural gas. And furthermore, what we've done as a city, we passed a green building law to reduce harmful emissions from the buildings in terms of our built environment, and also to make sure that current buildings have a retrofitment for them to reduce energy consumption. So those are the things that we've implemented in the meanwhile.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for kicking us off by talking so frankly about the challenges. And I think one of the things that we looked at in our research was the different transition pathways that different cities would have to take. But what we found was the risk of investing in a transition fuel is there's a huge risk of stranded assets. So we should talk more. Okay, I'm going to go to the next question for Mayor Boutaleb. And I wanted to ask, in the context of rising energy prices in Europe, how are you leveraging the energy transition in your city to decarbonize energy and at the same time shelter citizens from rising prices and energy poverty?
Good afternoon. The biggest mistake I think we can do is that say, well, confronting with a higher price for energy will stop the transition. That will be stupid and that will be not wise. So we don't do that. But we have to cope with the urgent, I should say, acute problem of today, because citizens are coping with the higher energy prices. The price per cubic meter gas is tripled, and for electricity also 2.5 times as it used to be. So it was wise for the European Commission and the Dutch government to put a maximum price on it and to dictate that. We have, by law, the space to do that. And that means that if the market price, let me say, there is not really a market for energy nowadays in Europe. If the prices are doing this, then the market must intervene. That's the government, and we do that. So that's really important to maximize the price, to bring stability in the households, and at the same time to give people subsidies for bringing solar systems on the roof, insulating their own houses, and to be aware when you use energy. Let me tell you my personal story. I have an app on which I can monitor my energy consumption. And what I did recently was insulating my floor. I have a very old house built in 1907, so little facilities to insulate the system. The windows and the roof. I see every day that my energy consumption, since I did that small investment of $3,000, is 2/3. So I save 2/3 of energy by doing this. So we stimulate people to invest, and we get them subsidies to invest in insulating their own houses. The lower your income, the more money you get. But this shows another thing, another lesson, that we, the civilized part of the world, and allow me to be political, the civilized part of the world have been trusting a sleeping bear in Russia, thinking that the ideological differences will disappear the moment we enhance international trade, be part of the big community that is better for everyone. I have been traveling the world for my port and for my city to work on trade and relations. Everywhere in the world, I succeeded in shaking hands and bringing friendship. Not in Russia. I did not succeed in Russia. Even when I visited the governor of St. Petersburg, I brought the president with me, and at the entrance, they bought the president a room to scan it before giving it me back to give it together to the governor. They say something about trust. And we've been trusting that system for long, and we have been naive, politically naive, to trust that, and not underlining and not accepting, and not being aware, probably, that part of the world are using energy as part of an ideological agenda for geopolitical reasons. Back to the issue, what learns that me, that is, we have to accelerate our energy transition. Not stop it, but accelerate that to reduce the transition time. Probably it's 25, 30 years. That is according to the scientific findings of the World Energy Agency in Paris. They do the math and expect that the transition will be 25, 30 years from fossil to complete renewables. I would be really happy to see whether we can succeed in doing that in 15 years. But then we should not forget the agenda of the young lady from Kampala, who was speaking this morning, that we need also an international effort to help these countries to speed up their own processes, because it's right. Part of the story is truth. In the north, we have responsibility for the mess we created in south. Thank you, young lady from Kampala. I think she's sitting over there. It was a great story.
Thank you. And I think you touched upon a number of things that kind of came up in our research around the fair share approach we need to take to transitions, the responsibility that we need to assign to sort of certain cities. And it was interesting that both of you talked about energy efficiency and the huge part that energy efficiency has to play in the transition. Thank you very much. Max, I'd like to come to you now. Can you tell us a bit about how distributed renewable energy technologies open new possibilities to create create more inclusive communities and more inclusive cities?
First, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. And in regards to that question, as we think about the standard fossil fuel powered plants that have given us all energy for hundreds of years now, and we make the shift into newer energy resources such as solar, wind, battery backup systems, each of these different sectors are creating their own specific niche of jobs, which each contain their own skill sets that may not have been relevant to previous industries. With these new skills require a well-trained workforce, as well as people who are able to fulfill those jobs. And thinking about New York City, where I'm from, and its role in all this, with the COVID-19 pandemic, it really had an outshined effect on disproportionate communities. And people who were unable to work remotely really felt a lot of the effects of COVID much more than those who were. And they experienced, greater risks to their health, greater joblessness in many cases. At the same time the pandemic was starting, New York City and New York State, before it, each were passing landmark climate legislation acts with very high carbon reduction targets. And more recently this summer, the United States as a whole passed federal legislation, the Inflation Reduction Act, which was, again, a landmark piece of law that is going to put the United States in a better direction it's ever been. With all these carbon reduction targets and the amount of carbon emissions that need to be reduced, it simply cannot be done without a workforce that is trained and able to do the boots on the ground work. And that's where the organization I work with, Solar One, comes in. We are a nonprofit based in New York City, and we provide workforce development programs in partnership with other organizations across the city to train and unemployed folks for these types of jobs. We train people in green construction, energy efficient building operations and maintenance, high efficiency HVAC and heat pump installation, and thinking of building electrification and how it fits into all this. That is going to be crucial to New York's movement in the future as we think about reducing our energy usage. And getting back to the pandemic, and also I want to mention environmental justice and how that fits into all this. Mm-hmm. If we think of shifting from fossil fuel power to distributed renewable energy, historically marginalized communities are the ones that have been living near fossil fuel power plants, and they have experienced health issues, have been forced to have dirty water, dirty air. We need to think of these communities and how we can incorporate them into some of these job opportunities that tie into this, it's an energy revolution, but it really is a job revolution at the same time. Yeah. And it is critical to think of both simultaneously.
Great, thank you very much. And I mean, talking about the kind of an energy transition, but also a job opportunity at the same time, I'll come back to you, Mayor Butaleb, if I may. As a mayor of a port city and innovation hub, how do you see the role of renewable energy in driving industrial and job opportunities?
The book, it's Economy Stupid. If you don't know it, please buy it. And I tend to add one word to the title. It's the green economy stupid. I'm mayor for 14 years, and we have the largest port in the Western Hemisphere. It's there where 150,000 people are working every day. And the number of people connected with the port economy is 500,000. Transports, logistics, whatever. And I see if this is the X timetable, this is the Y, the number of jobs, I see the number of jobs declining for obvious reasons. 10 years ago, we had 8 persons to deal with 1 crane in the port. And nowadays, full automated terminals. 1 person in an air-conditioned room, nobody in the crane. 2 monitors, a cup of coffee, 2 joysticks, monitoring the whole thing. And if needed, a drone. Fascinating. So we lose a lot of working opportunities. Happy enough, the Port of Rotterdam is big. So if you lose 50 jobs, there is another employer who needs 40, another one who needs 10. And the Port Authority, that is the city of Rotterdam, plays a role in matching these jobs. But in fact, the only way to create new jobs is to innovate. So if this is, again, the timetable, and this is the Y, the number of jobs, the declining line is this, and innovation is doing this. It's there where the two lines are crossing. Go into the X angle, it's there where we define the transition time. And the only way to reduce the transition time is to invest in the new technology. How we do that? Thousands of windmills in the North Sea. Thousands onshore. This stuff needs to be fabricated. You need to bring it there, to fix it, to make it work, to lay down the cables, to connect that with the grid onshore. And all this stuff needs to be maintained once in 6 months, to bring the windmills onshore, maintain them, bringing them back. Did you count how many jobs that are? More than we lose. And I think that is what I call, it's the new economy, it's stupid. If people in powerful positions are that conservative and saying, we're not a move towards that innovation because we lost job, that is a stupid thing. You have to move towards the new economy to create new jobs, to compensate the jobs you lose. And then we come to the story of my neighbor. My concern is, do we will have enough skilled labor? And that's a big issue, not only in my city, also in other cities in the world. And I'm not talking about engineers with university skills. I'm talking about well-trained, vocational training, boys and girls dealing with all these transformations. And that will be an endeavor for all of us to educate youngsters in this domain.
Thank you. I think it's fantastic hearing both times you've talked about the need to respond to this crisis by accelerating renewables, not moving away from them. And that absolutely chimes with the message from our research. So it's great to hear you say that. In terms of the need for upskilling, Max, if we can come back to you briefly, if I may ask you just to sort of comment. You already talked a bit about training and reskilling, but is there anything you want to add in terms of what we've heard from Mayor Butaleb?
Sure. As far as how it's done, I can at least say what our organization does that's been very successful. So in addition to the workforce development training programs, we also provide community solar benefits to New Yorkers from low to moderate income communities. We provide youth education all across the city in all 5 boroughs. And the only way this is done is our reliance on strong strategic partnerships with local community organizations. These are groups that have their ear to the ground and really know the residents in their specific zip codes one-on-one. And by leveraging each of our core competencies, they're able to engage the most micro-local residents possible and connect them to opportunities such as what Solar One provides. And it really helps build this relationship and get us closer to these climate goals that we're talking about.
Okay, so providing the right training, but also making sure it's done in an incredibly inclusive, community-engaged way is important. Okay, you're nodding, so I'm getting it right. All right, I'd like to just come back to you, Mayor Williams, for our last question. And I think it's the right one to end on. How important are renewable energy solutions to improve the livelihood of your residents?
Look, for us, the science is quite clear. The harm caused by burning fossil fuel and the benefits by using renewable energy. I mean, the numbers are there. About global warming, about the air pollution causing premature deaths of over 13,000 during a year in South Africa, for example. Renewable energy can create green jobs. In my city, for example, we've got 75% unemployment rate for the youth, and that's youth unemployment. So creating jobs using renewable energy can amount to about 100,000 jobs by 2030 across all South African cities. So the benefits are clear, and we're definitely moving in that direction.
Fantastic. I think that's a perfect note to end on. Thank you so much to our 3 panelists. It's been amazing to hear about the work that you're all doing. And as I said when I introduced you, I'd like to not not just thank you for your time today, but really to thank you for all the work that you're doing outside of today, because that's what gives us all hope for the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Koike Yuriko, the Governor of Tokyo. I'm honored to have this opportunity to speak now. Devastating natural disasters have been occurring all over the world as the climate crisis continues to worsen. Similarly, the global energy crisis has made it clear that the pursuit of decarbonization is the key to ensuring energy security. Tokyo will drastically strengthen its policies with the 3 guiding principles of HTT, a Japanese acronym to save, to generate, and to store electricity. The Tokyo metropolitan government is accelerating its efforts to achieve carbon half, a plan to have carbon emissions by 2030 and to reach zero emissions by 2050. Tokyo is a large city with a population of approximately 14 million. More than 70% of its CO2 emissions come from buildings. Since buildings are used for decades, those constructed from now on will determine the environmental performance of cities in the long term. The Tokyo metropolitan government is preparing to enact a solar panel mandate in April 2025, which will require new, small, and medium-sized buildings, including houses, to install solar power generation equipment. We will also continue examining ways to reduce installation costs and promote solar panel recycling. Green hydrogen, which is produced without emitting carbon, is expected to act as an adjusting mechanism for solar and other renewable energy. Hydrogen, which can be produced from various sources, will also play a major role in ensuring energy security. The Tokyo metropolitan government formulated the Tokyo Hydrogen Vision in March of this year. We aim to achieve a hydrogen-powered society by expanding hydrogen utilization on both the supply and demand side. Time to act. Now is the time to accelerate climate action. Let's work together to confront the impending climate crisis. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias a nuestros panelistas.
Thank you to our panelists for your important insights, as well as Yukiko Koike for his Governor of Tokyo for his remarks.
The conversation by including the hashtag C40 Summit and also the hashtag United in Action on your social media post. We have heard from hundreds of more city residents about the policies that they think will bring the most well-being to their communities. Kristen from the United States would like to roof the streets and sidewalks with solar panels and return the power saving to city residents. And I think that's a wonderful idea. And Alex in Lagos wants to see a transition to clean energy, especially for public mobility. Okay, next up. Experts will discuss the challenges and solutions on financing renewable energy projects that put people first. So please welcome our panelists, Lucia Spinelli, Senior Energy Specialist for the World Bank, and Nina Rentel, Director of Social Technologies at Gerardo Falcós. Y también nuestro moderador, Casey Sutherland, Managing Director of Climate Solutions and Networks at C40. Bienvenidas.
Thanks very much, Vanessa, and hi everyone. It's great to see you, and big thanks to everybody in the room for attending, but also to the thousands we have watching through the live stream. We've had incredible uptake on the live stream today, so it's super exciting. And Nina, thank you for joining us. Can you hear us?
Yes, hi.
Great stuff. So thanks to both of my panelists, Nina especially for switching. We hope to see you here in Buenos Aires, Nina, but we're delighted that you could at least join us on Zoom. So a big thanks. And Lucia, thank you for joining us. So,
thanks for the invitation.
So really today, for the next 10 minutes or so, we're going to be continuing our conversation on how renewable energy enables cities to put people first in our energy systems. People are the users of our energy. We need to put them first and include them in the decision-making for the future of our energy system. So as Vanessa said, Lucia is a senior energy expert at the World Bank, working in the Latin America and Caribbean region for 20 years, and so she brings a vast amount of experience to this conversation. And Nina Rental is the Director of Social Technologies at Gerando Falcões, an institute founded in Brazilian favelas and present in more than 6,000 favelas. And she is responsible for developing innovative solutions and tackling multidimensional poverty in favelas. So I'm going to jump us straight into our conversation because we haven't got long. So,
Please,
Lucia, starting with you. We know that the World Bank is financing some large renewable energy projects in Argentina, but also beyond. Can you tell us a bit about the importance of these projects?
Sure. Well, for the World Bank, the climate dimension is very relevant, and we try to embed the climate dimension in everything we do. That means in projects, in our analytical work, and in the dialogue we have with our counterparts. So taking in consideration the climate dimension, renewable energy, of course, is one of the topics that we try to really work under the bank, also together with energy efficiency, and we try to foster different types of initiatives from the countries in terms of renewable energy. In the particular case of Argentina, for instance, we have been involved in energy, in supporting and access through renewable energy. Argentina has a very good rate of coverage rate. However, there are still a lot of places that don't have access to the grid, and renewable energy is a very good solution for those cases. But we have also been involved in the other extreme, no? Let's say huge de-risking investments in wind farms and solar farms under the Renovar program. No? So that's a little bit both extremes in the particular case of Argentina. In other parts of the world, we are involved in different kinds of projects, in urban projects that always try to incorporate the climate dimension and renewables energy as a part of the initiatives in order to improve the quality of life of the people in those specific communities.
That's fantastic to hear, and you've set us up very nicely for my question to Nina as well, so thank you very much for that. It's great to hear about the project. So I'm hoping Nina's still with us. I can't quite see her on the screen now, but I'm hoping she is.
Yes.
Ah, great, she's reappeared. So Nina, with you, I'd really like to explore the positive social impact of small-scale energy projects. So could you talk to us about the renewable energy solutions and how they open up new opportunities to transform the lives of favela residents?
Yes, it's a great honor to be here with you. I wish I could be in Buenos Aires. But as you mentioned, Gerando Falcões, we are present in more than 6,000 favelas in Brazil. And we have been working with a project called Favela 3D. It's a systemic change project that we aim to transform favelas into dignified, digital, and more developed territories, where we foresee how we see favelas in the future as the space of innovation. And we create systemic change plans that we work 8 areas, including sustainability projects. What we're doing is we're building bridges between public and private sectors, bringing the most innovative solutions to meet the potential of the knowledge that we know exists in the favela that we have been working with for so long, and create new solutions from communication, from co-construction, co-building through these dynamics that we build in the process of working together with each of the favela that we work with. On the local level, we have been implementing solar panel projects that aim to bring high quality electricity, low cost energy, and as well as strengthening the sustainability agenda in each of the favelas. In the favela Mars,
which is our pilot project in the inner side of São Paulo. We're going to have solar panel in 100% of the infrastructural processes that we're building. We're building new houses for 100% of the favelas, as well as new community infrastructure. All of them are going to have solar panels, making it the first slum in Brazil to be fully sustainable in energy creation. And this process is not only important as a milestone to present the favela as a place of disruption and innovation for energy, renewable energy, but it also creates jobs, as we have seen mentioned in the previous panel, for people to be working with the maintenance and the installation of the panels in the community at the moment, but also once it's done, we're going to have these people being able to join as a workforce in the solar panel industry that is growing in Brazil. So as we bridge these solutions, we can see that renewable energy is one of the paths that has been growing as one way to bring innovation and new jobs, green jobs to the favelas, but also bring the favelas to the center point of the discussion of how we're going to create new and more resilient communities for the future, and bridging the gaps between the new technologies and these places that need them the most.
That's fantastic to hear. It's great to hear about the project in Sao Paulo, but I'm really pleased you focused on green jobs there, you know, as our theme for today and our announcement earlier of C40 mayors really coming together and pushing towards the creation of 50 million new green jobs, and really the role of which both local and more national or citywide or state level renewable energy projects can play in that, I think is really important. So we also heard at the beginning of this session about some more evidence base that's come out for cities as well around renewables now being cheaper than fossil fuels pretty much everywhere in the world. But they do tend to have high capital upfront costs, renewable energy systems. So, Lucia, how do you think finance providers can better support urban renewable energy projects, really with the view to be able to transform the lives of residents, create green jobs, and all of the benefits that come along?
Well, I think urban projects have 2 or 3 characteristics that are important to keep in mind and to better understand in order to help finance those projects. Cities have a good understanding or a better understanding on what's happening, no? Because they're near the demand. And demand is growing at city level. No? So there's a lot of knowledge there that should be somehow capitalized by the city when they design these projects. And in addition, cities are also suffering quality of service issues, for instance, no? are suffering grid issues or other things that perhaps are not handled by the city as a jurisdiction, but they are the ones that have the demand and that they need the resource, they need electricity in order to foster their activities. So and I think there's a lot of space there for renewables and for projects to be designed with good information coming from the city, with the understanding of what are the particularities, the behavior of the demand, and also understanding how renewables can help, for instance, to tackle, through storage, for instance, to tackle specific quality of service issues and to assure that the city can grow and that there are no some neighborhoods that have worse quality than others. So if all that information is part of the design, those projects will be stronger and it will be easier also to finance them, because it's something that affects the city, and the city has the capability to help tackle those issues, those specific issues.
That's fantastic, thank you. I totally agree. I think really ensuring that cities have a voice and input to these decisions and to be able to input into the design and the operation of the energy system is vital. Yeah, thank you. And so, Nina, let me come to you as well for the final question on, with your experience, what advice can you give to cities that are really looking to support residents, especially marginalized groups, to play a more active role in the energy transition?
Yes, what we have been doing in our project, and we are having great results with it, is really changing the mindset behind the way we have been working with marginalized groups and the government has been working with marginalized groups. We have been able to provoke society as a whole, not only government, but really bringing the investors and private sectors to work together on a main goal to really change the reality we see in the favelas. And when we get to do this, we bring the whole society to understand what the priority is. And the government has a key role playing in this dialogue. And we need to understand that the solutions that are being done outside of the favelas, as historically we've seen, and they bring them ready into the favelas, are really the solutions that don't really last, and we need to bring them to the dialogue with each one of the favelas. So in one of the cities that we've been working with in São Paulo, we were able to provoke the local government to create the secretary of the favelas. So the government was able to create a structure that looks at their own favelas from each one of the favelas in the territory, stepping away from a very common structure of government, looking at each themes that they're working at separately, to be working really at a territorial point of view and creating dialogue and creating strategies for each favela and in their own reality, and then creating strategic plans with the favela from a dialogue and creating a energy transition plan with each of the favelas. But this also has to go hand in hand with a larger social development project, so that the favela understands that this has to do with a larger project that is a way forward from a reality that nowadays puts them behind and not really being able to understand the necessity of putting this into in their first priority. So we understand that nowadays sometimes the energy will not be the first priority because so many other issues are on top of that. So bringing this into a plan built with the favela, understanding that energy transition is a way forward together with the whole social development project, is the way that the city can really bring forward the favelas and the marginalized communities together in a master plan to, for a greater energy transition system in their cities and their marginalized communities.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Nina. And I'm sad to say we've come to the end of our time together. I could continue this conversation for a long time. It's really fascinating. My main takeaway actually is dialogue there between all of it, between all levels. So with cities and communities, marginalized communities, finance, national governments, and really ensuring that we are, providing all of the information necessary to put cities at the heart of the energy transition, of a just and fair energy transition. So a huge thank you to my guests, and I look forward to continuing the conversation some other time. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to say I'm still here for the next session, but I move over here so that you think it's a different session. So I'm just creating the illusion. I'm going to also sit over there as well, so it'll look a bit different. So for our next conversation, we're going to really discuss how cities and energy leaders are collaborating, but also innovating to maximize the positive impacts of their energy decarbonization strategies. So I'm going to be joined by two fantastic speakers. I just noticed this session is all women. All-women session, which is just awesome. So, So the previous one and then this one. So I have two fantastic women to invite to the stage. Lord Mayor Harstorp of Andersen from Copenhagen and Caroline Golin from Google. So please come and join me. Great, so thank you. Now we're sitting comfortably and we're in a new location. I'll briefly introduce my marvellous speakers. So Lord Mayor Harstorp Andersen became Lord Mayor in January 2022 of the great city of Copenhagen, and you're previously a member of the Danish Parliament. And I have here, but I also know that you are dedicated to making Copenhagen more inclusive, more equal, and more sustainable, and particularly putting energy at the heart of that. So we're looking forward to hearing more. And Dr. Caroline Golin is the Global Head of Energy Policy and Market Development at Google. Delighted to have you. And you're really leading on global energy market development, strategy, advocacy, and policy for Google. And we're going to hear a bit more in this session about this super exciting initiative that Google have going on at the moment. So I'd like to start with you, Lord Mayor Harstorp Andersen, to really give you a question that's based on Copenhagen being at the forefront of the energy transition for quite some time now. And we're really pleased that you are a signatory city to our C40 Renewable Energy Accelerator, setting that leading edge of ambition. So can you give us some of the examples of the approaches that you've used in the city and that we really need to decarbonize our energy system?
Yeah. Well, good afternoon, everybody. And this is, I think it's the last session today. So thank you for still hanging on. I think this is like a really, really interesting session because in Copenhagen, we have an increasing amount of energy coming from renewable energies, energy sources, and it's mostly wind turbines, solar panels, biofuels, everything like that. More specifically, we actually have 85% of our district heating and approximately 68% of our electricity comes from renewable sources. But it's still not 100%. As we know, the most CO2 neutral energy is the energy that we do not use. And that means that, as an example, I will just try to explain how we have improved the energy infrastructure in Copenhagen. Because one of the things we have done to save energy is actually to digitalize our energy efficiency in our public buildings by optimizing the energy efficiency by using digital monitoring and to making sure that that we managed our buildings both for sports, for daycare, for leisure, libraries, nursing homes, whatever. 98% of all our public buildings are actually being digitalized, digital monitored, so that if we, for some reason, can see that somebody put in a machine sucking up energy, or if we see that suddenly somebody is doing something that means that the energy is going in the wrong direction, we can actually not only monitor it, we can also go out there and target it and fix it. And that means a lot to us that we, with these systems, is enabling us to optimize our energy consumption a lot. And data derived from these systems also means that we can get into investments in a whole other way. It means that now we can see business cases for where should we do the installation, for instance, of buildings, like the mayor of Rotterdam was telling he was doing that in his own home. Well, we're looking into that and saying, what kind of buildings is that we're going to insulate more? Or are there any other ways that we can make investments that in short term will give us more energy-friendly consumption? And so these are some of the examples. And compared to our 2010 baseline, this has meant that we have lowered Copenhagen's electricity and our heating consumption with more than 20% just by going into looking at data on a daily basis. And yeah, as I said, this opened up the door for a more flexible energy consumption, and we share our knowledge. We share our knowledge not only with other public partners, but also with private companies in the city. And we also have a bilateral commitment to helping out Buenos Aires. And this was one of the first things that I did when I left the plane, was going to one of the public buildings here in Buenos Aires and looked into how can we relate and how can we share our knowledge on how to save energy. Because as I mentioned, energy saved is more than green energy. It is energy that we do not have to use.
Totally agree. Yes, I totally agree this way. And digitalizing energy efficiency is just super cool to me. I mean, you call me a buildings and energy geek, but I'm happy with it, right? I mean, digitalizing energy efficiency. And fantastic to hear you're sharing with Buenos Aires, but I know from our work in C40 that Copenhagen is actively sharing these learnings with cities all around the world. So it's very inspiring work. So Caroline, maybe I can move on to you. And Google has a long history of leading the energy transition. So 2 leaders here as well in the corporate world. And in 2020, I know that Google really kind of came up with a new innovative approach that you've been spearheading. So can you tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, I'd love to. And thank you for having me. This has been an amazing experience so far, and I've just learned so much to date. You know, cleaning our own operations has been a centerpiece of Google's sustainability goals since the beginning. And we've had a journey, right? And we've learned a lot over that journey. You know, in 2007, we became the first company of our size to become carbon neutral. And we did that largely through the purchase of high-quality offsets, which is a strategy that's in place for a lot of corporates right now. In 2012, we set the goal to run all of our operations, which looks like our campuses and our data centers, on 100% renewable energy. And we would meet that goal through a global matching approach. And in that, you know, the past 10 years, we learned a lot, and we did pioneer. I'd like to say we were a pioneer in the clean energy industry. We met the goal of meeting our operations with 100% renewable energy globally in 2018, and we've met that goal every year since. And that means that we've procured over 7 gigawatts of renewable energy, and just to put that in perspective, that could power New York City, you know. And so that's a lot of renewable energy, and so we learned a lot in that process. And when we took a step back after, you know, patting ourselves on the back and feeling like, man, we are really driving change, we started to look at our portfolio, and what we realized was that we weren't actually driving the impact that we wanted to drive. Namely, we weren't getting fossil fuels off the system as quick as we wanted to. We were adding renewables, but we weren't getting fossil fuels off. And in some cases, they were adding fossil fuels to the system because of the amount of renewable energy we'd put there. We also recognized, because we were taking this global matching approach, that we weren't driving the change we wanted to see locally. So we weren't having the benefits of the clean energy transition always show up in the neighborhoods where we had office space, you know, where we had data centers and like. And that was hard for us because we take very seriously the stewardship of the communities where we co-occupy space. So we took a step back and we said, okay, how do we drive the most amount of impact and the most amount of innovation with everything we've learned and where we sit in the economy today? And we said, well, what's the real goal? The real goal is the complete decarbonization of the grid. No more fossil fuels. Every hour of every day, every kilowatt hour is generated by a carbon-free energy resource. So that's the goal we set. So in 2020, we set the goal to run all of our operations, all of our data centers, all of our campuses worldwide, South Carolina to Singapore, on 24/7 carbon-free energy. And our aim is to meet this goal by 2030. So what that means is that all of our energy resources will have to be procured locally, which means we have to show up locally in the communities where we have operations. It also means that we are looking beyond wind and solar. We are looking to the next generation technologies, the ones that we know we are going to need to actually fully decarbonize the grid. Inherent in this is just fundamental system change. If we really want to decarbonize the grid, we have to just change the system from top to bottom, the policies, the regulatory structures, all the markets that have guided us for the past 100 years. To change the system, you need partners and you need space. So last year, we started out on this journey of saying, who do we know we're going to be critical in making this transition happen? Because I always like to say, if we meet this goal and no one else does, we've absolutely failed. It's about scaling that impact. So last year, we partnered with the UN to launch the 24/7 Carbon-Free Energy Compact, which is the space where we can all collectively get together and say, let's drive towards full grid decarbonization. And this year, I'm excited to announce, and so thankful to be up on stage and honored to be with you two lovely ladies, and Cassie's been amazing in partnering us with this. We're really excited to announce that we're going to be partnering with C40 to launch a pilot program. a 24/7 carbon-free energy pilot program for cities, with our 3 inaugural leading cities being London, Paris, and Copenhagen. And I'm thrilled about this for a number of reasons, which I'm sure we will get into. But everyone here knows that cities are driving change. I mean, I've been here for 2 days and I'm floored, everything that I'm hearing and learning. And there's so much for us to learn. And so with this program, we're really hoping that we can come together and say, how do we drive the most amount of impact? How do we drive the most amount of innovation? What can we learn together? How do we couple to change these systems? Because if we want clean air, if we want clean water, if we want upward mobility, if we want all these things, we're going to have to focus on our energy system, and we're going to do it faster if we partner together.
It's great news. We're delighted about the partnership too, and it's wonderful. Thank you, Caroline, for launching that today. We're very, very pleased to make that happen. So let me briefly, Lord Mayor, come to you about this excitement of the partnership, which is great, and I'm sure you're really pleased. But of course, it's tough. You know, this is a high challenge. So, what are the main, 2 or 3 challenges that you really see as Lord Mayor to decarbonising energy use every minute, every hour, every day of the year?
Yeah. Well, as you know, or as outlined in the 24/7 carbon-free energy approach, there is a lot of untapped potential when it comes to actually using renewable energies and using them and not only using them and adding them, but also getting rid of the fossil fuel energy. And to do that, we need to control our consumption of energy more wisely than we have done before. And earlier on, we heard about this personal app that some of us have, where we can control our own consumption energy when we are back home. But what when we are out and when we're at work, for instance, working for the municipality of Copenhagen, what do we do there to control consumption of energy? Well, this is where we are trying to now partner up and try to figure a way that we can spend to control the energy that we use in the municipality and in the public buildings, and use it when we have the renewable energy. For instance, when the sun is out and the solar panels are almost heating up, or when we have the wind blowing or something like that. But also controlling it by making sure that when we are in a process where we are firing up on the fossil fuels, that then we lower our consumption. And in order to do that, we now have to take all our digital monitoring and management of our public buildings and put them together with data on an hour-to-hour basis, meaning that we have to control our consumption more flexible than ever before. And of course, this is a challenge. It is a challenge because our technology in this issue is quite new still, and the market for it is also something that we need to work on together. So this is some new steps that we are entering now, but we are doing it with good partners, and we're looking forward to do it, and we're very much happy to be at the forefront again, trying out new ways to control our consumption and in the end save energy again.
Fantastic, and we're delighted that you're part of it, and look forward to seeing what Copenhagen can do. So that's great. And so, great stuff. And Caroline, I'm going to come to you with my last question, which I have got a minute for, I'm afraid. That's all I can spare. So, we've talked here about this big challenge of 24/7 carbon-free energy. I imagine a lot of people would say, oh, well, it's often dealt with at the national level, and I think we've heard great examples from the Lord Mayor of the role cities can play. But what have you at Google really identified as the one critical role that cities can play to help everyone achieve 24/7 carbon-free energy?
Yeah, it's a great question. So naturally, this partnership with cities is, almost a no-brainer extension of where we've been with Google. Google's been partnering and supporting cities on their clean energy and climate goals for a number of years. We have a commitment to work with over 500 cities to reduce a gigaton of emissions. And we have products like Environmental Insights Explorer and Greenlight, which are working to do that. But this is about partnership in tackling the systems that are blocking us from the clean energy transition. And those systems are real. And the reason why cities are so critical is because they are living and breathing those systems every day. And they are responsible for the constituents who are either going to flourish in this new system or be left behind, right? And so what I love about this partnership and what I'm gaining to learn more than anything is that really recognizing the relevance of the grid. The grid is the linchpin in how we transition to a more sustainable future. Anywhere you go, it's 50 to 80% of carbon emissions. And it is the key to unlocking new, clean, green jobs. It's the key to better health, better water, better air, and really getting the communities to rally around this and see this as an opportunity instead of a barrier, and be innovative. I mean, the answer right there is the reason why we're partnering with cities, because you're willing to be innovative, and you can scale that innovation quickly. And so that's what Google is about, is scaling innovation to drive the biggest amount of impact. So, you know, why cities? I think it's sort of a no-brainer. You know?
Fantastic. We'll leave on that. Why cities? It's a no-brainer. Thanks ever so much, everyone. Thanks for joining, and big thanks to Lord Mayor Harstorp Andersen of Copenhagen and Caroline of Google. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that wonderful conversation. And our final speaker of the day is an inspiring youth climate leader who believes that we cannot achieve climate justice if people from all backgrounds and corners of the world are not included in the climate conversation, and she is absolutely right. So please welcome Vanessa Nakatai, youth climate justice activist and UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador.
Thank you for inviting me to speak with you all. I know you have all had a very long day, so I'll come straight to the point. Of course, I am not a climate expert or an energy expert or a cities expert. I am a 25-year-old Ugandan climate justice activist. I am not sure what I can do to inspire leaders to enact policies that will accelerate the energy transition within cities. But I can tell leaders this: we are out of time. We cannot wait any longer. The climate crisis is here. The science couldn't be clearer. We are approaching major climate tipping points that put cities around the world at massive risk from deadly heat waves, devastating storms, and dangerous sea level rise. On top of all of this, people in cities all around the world are suffocating. Air pollution from the burning of fossil fuels is killing more than 7 million people every single year. From Berlin to Beirut to Buenos Aires, it's the poorest people who are most affected by air pollution. It is the poorest who live in cramped informal settlements, often near rubbish dumps, who feel the full force of toxic air. And yet, while millions of poor people suffer the impacts of air pollution, still 1 out of every 6 people living in African cities still doesn't have access to energy. Our leaders know all of this. The science is not new to them. The devastating health impacts are not new to them. And the justice or the injustice, is not new to them. But leaders are still talking about investing in more coal, oil, and gas. The UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, says investing in new fossil fuels is economic and moral madness. Enough is enough. No more words. We need action. So where do we start? We must stop finance for all new fossil fuels development. We need immediate and massive investments in energy efficiency and clean renewable energy. And let's be very clear, gas is not clean. We need leaders around the world to meet the new WHO air quality guidelines. We need to make it easier for cities in the global south to access climate finance, and we need that funding to come in the form of grants and not loans. We need the creation of a loss and damage facility at COP27 to help vulnerable communities deal with the impacts of the climate crisis. This is just the beginning of the to-do list, but we need to start somewhere, and cities can drive much of this action. So let's stop talking. We have our to-do list. Let's start doing. After all, millions of citizens all around the world are counting on you. Thank you.
Gracias, Vanessa, for that powerful, powerful message. It's been a fantastic day here at C40 World Mayor Summit. Global mayors, city experts, businesses, and youth leaders have all shown what it really means to be united in action. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here with us. Tomorrow, our program will begin at 9 a.m., so we will be here waiting for you. Que pasen una maravillosa noche en la hermosa ciudad de Buenos Aires.
Have a wonderful evening in this beautiful city of Buenos Aires. Good evening.